Hello, everyone.
Hello.
Evening.
Good evening.
And Melissa, if you let me know if we're okay to go at 5 o'clock.
We are ready.
Thank you. Okay, I have 5 o'clock on 2 devices, and so we'll go ahead and begin the meeting. We'd like to call the meeting of the San Bruno City Council special meeting of April 21st, 2021 to order. Roll call, please.
Councilmember Hamilton.
Here.
Councilmember Salazar.
Here.
Vice Mayor Medina.
Here.
Mayor Rico Medina.
Here.
Councilmember Mason, just arrived. One moment and we might get her on roll call.
Okay. And we go on to item number 3, public comments for items not on the agenda. This would be for up to 3 minutes for items not on the agenda. And there are 2 items, which is in regards to downtown streetscape and also the personnel board. So if it's other than those items, if you could please raise your virtual hand and we will start to call you in. So again, this is for public comments for items not on the agenda. And City Clerk, if you could begin.
I see Stephen Seymour. It's either Stephen or Sandra Perez Vargas.
Hi, it's Sandra.
Hi, Sandra. Whenever you're ready.
Okay, thank you very much. Thanks for the opportunity. A couple things. I wanted to talk about our cleanups this last weekend. Wanted to let you know that we received quite a few volunteers. We focused on the downtown area. This is community driven by the Cleaning San Bruno Now. And some of the people who are out volunteering us haven't been to our downtown area 10, 15, 20 years, and they live here in San Bruno. And they said they were reminded exactly of why they don't go down there. There was a lot of very dirty areas with litter all over the streets, which we picked up. Garbage cans just flowing over the storm drains. We can't get to those. So those had, cigarette butts, every type of filth in there. And people did start talking about how we're going to have changes coming up, how we're going to be doing something with our downtown, which we've talked about that a long time. Well, I encourage in the meantime to do what we can, because we don't know when those changes are coming. So if it's possible to get a cleaning person on San Mateo Avenue on Sunday mornings, it is the dirtiest day of the week after everybody's partied on Friday. That would be very beneficial until something else happens. Another thing, code enforcement needs to be boots on the ground on San Mateo Avenue. There are so many visible violations that are making our downtown look very ugly. Some of them have their garbage cans in front, overflowing with garbage, food scraps, weeds growing, dirty, filthy storefronts. Some look like they've had oil thrown at them. And so the important thing is, let's do what we can right now. You have the residents completely behind any efforts. And I think it would be a real lost opportunity to wait until the stars align for like the perfect thing when we're going to do everything downtown, which, I've been here 30 years. I've been told this is a transitioning area. Things are coming. Yeah, they've only gotten worse, unfortunately. The last thing I do want to say is El Crystal, that property. Man, we're getting a second bite at that apple. It's absolutely amazing. So I hope in this process, it'll be completely transparent, doing something really great with our community, maybe something in the park, but it's something that should not negatively impact the area and the residents there. Good things could be coming ahead, but we have to move past making up excuses. Instead of telling us what you can do, tell us what you can do. That will be a really refreshing change. Thank you.
Thank you for comments. City Clerk, I don't see any other hands raised at this time or anybody on the phone. Is that accurate?
Yes, that is accurate.
Okay. So we will now get into our study sessions. We have 2 items this evening. The first one is receive a presentation and provide direction regarding greenery and landscaping of downtown streetscape, Centennial Plaza, and Posey Park. And first we'll turn it over to our city manager, who then also we will have our community services director also participating as well. City manager.
Good afternoon, City Council, members of the public, Javon Grogan, City Manager. So we are here tonight, as the mayor said, for a study session on our downtown streetscape and two of our special areas downtown, Centennial Park and Centennial Plaza and Posey Park. So the idea tonight is to present council with a number of options and let you know of the staff's progress on the downtown areas. We are not asking for final direction. What we will be asking for is council feedback, because all three of these projects require funding. And so based on your feedback, we will attempt to identify funds in the budget that will come before you at the end of May for next fiscal year 2021. And so there's a lot of rich content that we're going to talk about tonight. I know that similar to the public comment that we just heard, the question is really, what can we do? Because everyone has a vision and everyone wants to improve our downtown. And we know that it's a multi-year, multi-pronged effort. There's a quick win project in here. And then there's taking our conceptual plan, which is the 30,000 streetscape plan, down to the block level and making progress on that, which unfortunately we didn't make progress on last fiscal year. And so we did the plan in 2019. And so now we want to take that down to the block by block schematic design level. And so that's what we'll be talking about, as well as a quick win for Centennial Plaza, and then really wanting to provide you with some rich information and find a direction for where we want to go with Posey Park. So with that, we will share the PowerPoint, and I'll turn it over to Ann Matola, our Community Services Director, who, by the way, as she may mention, her office is now downtown, so she sees and walks by this 8 hours a day at minimum.
Good evening, council members. All right, let's get to slideshow. So again, I'm Ann Matola, your Community Services Director. And this evening, I'm really pleased to present several projects from the Conceptual Downtown Streetscape Plan for your consideration. And tonight we're specifically talking about projects that are related to landscape and parks. As you recall, in October 2019, Council adopted a Conceptual Downtown Streetscape Plan. And there were a number of recommended improvements to activate public spaces, to green the downtown with trees and plantings, update amenities, provide wayfinding. The intention of all of these different elements was to create a cohesive and unique downtown identity. So this evening's presentation, we're going to address three elements of the plan: greening and landscaping, activating Centennial Plaza, and activating Posey Park. And we're also going to discuss the resource needs to move these projects from conceptual design to schematic design. So the first project area for consideration is greening and landscaping San Mateo Avenue. The adopted streetscape plan included restoration of trees to the downtown corridor. And some of the images that you'll see are taken from the adopted streetscape plan. So you're all familiar with the existing conditions. You're familiar with the plantings, which are in 49 large planters that line San Mateo Avenue in Genevan. The planters contained a mixed variety of plants and trees. They're not planted really in a manner to create a cohesive design or planting scheme. And they don't really support the unique identity, which was one of the goals and objectives of the streetscape plan. There are also a number of challenges with this particular planting program. Some of our planters have trees, and as you can see, they're not faring so well, maybe except for the one in front of Grand Leader, and I have no idea what Mike is feeding it, but that's like the only tree that is that robust on the avenue. And so what we're finding is the planters, there's a restriction of the root ball that's causing many of the trees to fail, and those that are surviving, with the exception of the one in front of Grand Leader, really are not thriving. Then we have the planters, and those plants in the planters pose another challenge. So the downtown has several different microclimates. So the same plant is going to react differently depending on where the location is on San Mateo Avenue. The irrigation is also limited. And so identifying a species to create a cohesive planting plan has a bit challenging, but the park maintenance team has been working on that. It had been trying to determine what plants thrive in these conditions to try to create some type of cohesive theming with colors, with planting types. And again, it is a bit of trial and error to see which plants establish well. But Parks has been establishing the success in a small number of planters before they start broader distribution. That's why you see that not all of the planters are activated. They're really trying to see what will grow, what will thrive, and then they want to grow on success. So the images in this slide show a number of our different successful results. So in the upper left, there's lavender and red lantana. It's a little overgrown. It's some of the older plantings that we have. The right-hand planter with the tree, it's a newer planting. We knew that lavender and lantana do well, so we tried it in this other location where it's also doing well. And then we have the bottom left. And so it has some of the original lavender, and the flowers are some of the plantings from the community members that have been formally adopting the planters. And so I just want you to kind of keep in mind that when you're doing this, they're also removing some of the things that we're trying to establish. So the intention is really good there with a number of community informal volunteers that have been going up and down the avenue, and they're adding whimsy, they're adding color. The intention is really good, and so we're taking that as a message that it's really time to try to figure out how we do something to make this a real sustainable greening plan for the downtown area. Okay, so this is what we're proposing to do. Staff is proposing to move forward with this element of the streetscape to restore trees to the downtown area. So lining trees is a very simple and iconic way to enhance the beauty and the character of San Mateo Avenue. It'll take some study on potential issues and restrictions based on existing underground infrastructure. I think some of you are aware that there are culverts on the east side of the street under the sidewalk. So that's one of the issues that we'll really need to take a look at. In the conceptual streetscape plan, the installation is actually called out in bulb outs, similar to what you see on the right in Burlingame. Sidewalk aligned installation with tree breaks is also an option. The photo on the left is from Millbrae. There might also be some other potential solutions that we need to explore as we find out more about the site, particularly once we know more about what's happening below ground. The streetscape and the tree installation may also trigger the need for stormwater management, which provides an opportunity to layer landscaping elements with grade level plantings. And I wanted to show you an example of this in Burlingame. These are examples of plantings incorporated into stormwater retention areas. And what you can see is it adds color, it adds greening, and it's actually a purposeful installation as well. So the greening and landscaping of the downtown is highly technical, and it'll require the assistance of landscape architectural design services. This resource is going to allow us to take the conceptual streetscape plan to a block level schematic plan, and to compare the process, it's somewhat similar to what we've had to do with the rack build. The project started out in conceptual design, very similar to the streetscape conceptual plan. So the schematic design moves those concepts to real application based on findings of site and environmental constraints and conditions. This is all necessary to get us to the point where we have construction documents and we can actually implement. As I mentioned, the most important technical issue to address is what's happening below the surface with the stormwater pipeline and culvert that exists in the area. And the additional scope is listed here, and it includes utility research, landscape design, topographic site surveys, stormwater management plans, review of geotech reports. It's a highly technical body of work. And so we need to bring that expertise in because it doesn't currently exist in our city. So the proposed next steps for this element is to identify funding in the 21-22 proposed budget of about $250,000 to bring on some landscape design services to assist us with this project. So now I'm going to move on to another element of the streetscape plan, which is activating special places. And two of the special places that I want to talk about are Centennial Plaza and Posey Park. So starting with Centennial Plaza, we are all familiar with the location and this image here. So I want to take a look at the plan view and kind of walk you through what is existing. So the plantings I'm going to go from San Mateo Avenue heading east. So the plantings that front San Mateo Avenue, they're rather low and rather sparse. The illustration actually makes them look a little bit more colorful and robust than what's there. The area surrounding the fountain, it's relatively level, but it slopes down towards the right, towards the east end of the parcel. So that central planting area that you see, it serves more as a barrier to keep pedestrians from gaining access to the unleveled portion of the site. And while there are elements like the fountain that try to add some visual interest, the existing plaza is currently not a program space. And that's the challenge. We really want to improve the plaza so people use it, it becomes activated. And so staff has, we worked on a plan which we believe that we could execute in a relatively short timeline, relatively low budget, in a good timeline. And the intention was to make this a place which was more usable, a place where people actually kind of spend time in the park. So again, going from San Mateo Avenue east, plantings on San Mateo Avenue side, right at that entry, we want to do something that marks that this is an entry. And in doing that, we may have to consider moving the time capsule just because it's smack dab in the middle of what's the entryway to the park. The area surrounding the planter would be renovated with new river rock and improved DG path. Greening elements include the addition of several trees. When you see the planting in the middle, it's thinned out, and that arc is a retaining wall, so everything to the east of it we can level out and then create more usable space there. And then you see tables. And so the idea is there's been certainly an upsurgence of eating outdoors. We really want to encourage people to come down to this. Our downtown has like an amazing assortment of restaurants, and this is a really perfect space for people to come and to congregate and to really have this a usable, active, vibrant space. In the lower right-hand part of the picture, you'll see kind of a gazebo, and depending on a partner restaurant, it could be something which they want to install there so they have a dedicated space to send their patrons. So staff has done some estimating on this. We believe that we could accomplish this for $80,000. And so the next steps would be to identify those funds to work on these improvements. Moving on to Posey Park. So we've been spending quite a bit of time over here at this park trying to evaluate site challenges and alternatives to the space, again, to kind of make it a little bit more vibrant, a little bit more usable. So a little bit of history for, I think many of you know this, but if there are people that are watching, they may not know that the fountain was turned off 4 to 5 years ago due to failure of the waterproofing of the structure, as well as failure of the structure itself. If you were to go and look in the basins and look at the fountain structure, you'll see exposed rebar, spalling of the concrete, and the waterproofing seal coat, which is almost on the entire structure that you see in this picture, it's peeling and flaking off. It's a very significant failure of that coating. Also, there was a leak that was found. And so staff has we've gone through different processes of elimination to investigate the source of the leak. And so we had the fountain, the people that work with the fountain plumbing, water department, and leak detection to come out. And the good news is that the fountain plumbing is intact. So we know that that water system is a good viable option for some of the options that we're going to talk about. But the structural sealant is in such disrepair that that's where we are being advised that the leaks are coming from. So as we look at the next slide, we're going to talk about different options to repurpose or renovate the park. Oops. Here we go. The first 4 options, there are going to be 5 options total, and these first 4 options reuse the existing infrastructure, and there's a price range on each of these options. It's a back of the napkin type estimate. And every one of them would include the $85,000 to repair the actual structure that you see there. So we're starting with 85 as kind of the minimum amount to actually just restore this to a working plaza with a fountain. So that's option number 1. Option number 2 restores the fountain, but also does something with the fountain itself to add more interest to the plaza by including some more murals along the actual structure of the fountain. If you were to go to the plaza, it's very stark, it's very monochromatic. I think there's success in breaking that up with the mosaic murals that are there. And so the idea is if you kind of restore the fountains and have the murals, it becomes more of an interest in the space. And so depending on the materials used and the surface area of coverage of a mural, that alone could be upwards of 200,000. So we have an estimate of 285,000 for that. Option 3 restores the fountain and adds landscaping, restores the fountain surfacing and then adds landscaping to the lower basins. And it's a fairly significant price tag for not a lot of space because the basins are only 18 inches. So in a lot of the work that we've been doing and bringing in people to kind of give us guesstimates and whatnot, we may need to do some excavation of the concrete to give us more depth. So there's more success of any plantings that we put there. And option 4 is a combination of landscaping and mural work. That is the highest amount of 500,000. Option 5 is to take a note from the streetscape plan and to kind of revisualize and renovate the entire plaza. This is more of intentional placemaking to include elements that engage people, to encourage them to spend more time there, rather than this be more of a pass-through Caltrain plaza where they just kind of go on their way to the train platform. It looks at creating a very unique, usable urban park space, and this would potentially include the demo of the fountain and starting from scratch. And this is estimated at about $2 million. So there's no funding currently identified for this project, but we have applied for, we put an appropriations request for the Transportation, Housing, and Urban Development Appropriations through Congresswoman Spears' office for $500,000. That would either take care of options 1 through 4, or at least get us through the design phase of a complete renovation of the park. So the next steps for Posey Park would be to identify funding options, and then based on the option that was of the interest of the council, to direct staff to proceed in investigating that. So at this point, we're looking for direction on the greening and landscaping, the implementation plan for Centennial, direction on Posey Park, and direction on on-call landscape architectural services that would really be of great assistance to execute all of these different elements. And that concludes my presentation.
Thank you very much for the presentation. At this time, if there are any members of the public that wish to speak on this topic, now would be the time. If you could, please to raise the virtual hand. And again, keeping it to the items that were presented that you just saw a moment ago. And City Clerk, and then we will come back to Council for questions, discussions, and then direction. City Clerk, if we can call on the public.
First is Stephen Seymour or Sandra Perez Vargas. Just one moment.
Okay, it is Stephen Seymour.
Hello, whenever you're ready, Stephen.
All right, thank you, Melissa. First of all, I'd like to applaud and thank Ann for a great presentation. I would ask her to help design all the city presentations because it was succinct and it wasn't too long, it wasn't overwhelming, but it was her ask is very clear. For the Posey Park, first of all, I'd like to also say that I think that the council should look deep in funding all of what she put up there. I think these are the steps that are needed to create an environment that invites the kind of businesses that we want on the avenue. And I would hate to see us cut this short because we're talking about history and the future of what our downtown looks like. And we all know, anyone who's lived here for any length of time at all knows that the public wants to see a more vibrant downtown. So I'd like to say that. I'd also like to say, kind of piggyback on a little bit to what Sandra said earlier. We've been asking for code enforcement and some attention from city for a long time down the avenue, and I really think this is the right time to do it. Mix it in. It'll help prepare us for the changes that are coming. I would hate to see the same kind of code violations that exist on the avenue today after we've spent $2 to $5 million to improve the street. It kind of would be for naught. And I really think we have the momentum right now to take some actions that the public's been asking for 8, 9, 10, 12, 15, 20 years or more. let's do the simple things on the avenue to prepare for this. And again, I ask the council to consider all of what Ann has proposed at the level 5 of the last portion of the presentation. And lastly, thank you, Ann, for a great presentation. And I appreciate the council's time in spending, determining what we can do downtown. I think you should think long and hard, though, about putting up benches, tables and benches, just because the benches invite people to lay on them. It's more of those chair things that need to go up. But I'm sure that the whoever's designing this will be able to lead you the right direction. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for your comments. We have our final speaker. When you're ready, City Clerk.
Yes, Nancy Foreman. Just one moment, Nancy, while I bring you in. Hi, Nancy. Can you hear us?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, whenever you're ready.
Okay. Hi, thank you for the presentation, Ann. I just want to ask a question about Posey Park. Is it really necessary to even have the fountains? Looking at the wind in the last couple of days, would the fountains still be able to even be on? I'm not convinced that fountains is the best use of that space, and I did not see an option that did not even activate the fountains, and maybe instead we just use them as planters. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you for your comments. And I'm not seeing any other speakers, so we will end with the public comments on this topic. And there was a question, which was in regards to the fountain. And obviously, we've had a little wind in San Bruno. And so if that's still viable, or that there was not an option in regards to not having the fountain. Does staff have any comments on that?
Yes, it was option 3, I believe, that was the option to turn the fountains into planters. And it is a very appropriate point questioning, should we be reactivating the fountains, not just because of the wind, but also because of the drought.
Okay, thank you for that. Now, we have them in my colleagues, 3 areas, and maybe we can take each area so we don't keep going all around. Why don't we start with the greening and landscaping? So we'll start with that one for questions on the presentation to staff. So questions, not your direction, not your commentary, just any questions on that topic. Colleagues. And we have Councilmember Hamilton, please.
So I also want to thank Ann for a great presentation, very, very clear, and thank all staff for working on this and bringing this to us. Everybody knows that this is something near and dear to my heart, and I'm very very pleased that we're talking about it. One comment that I have on the greening of downtown, that effort to identify appropriate trees for planting. One thing I didn't see in the notes that I think we should take into consideration would be to identify tree species that, when they're mature, have a high canopy, so that we don't obstruct the storefronts. So, like, for example, in that great picture in front of Grand Leader of the one healthy tree, you can't tell it's the Grand Leader unless you know, because the sign is completely obscured by the healthy tree. And it's not the tree's fault, it's just how it's going to grow when it's in a pot. So that's something I think we should look at, you know, the height at maturity and how the canopy forms on the particular species that we identify. I'm very, very supportive of the direction to start moving on this for trees. So I'll stop there.
Thank you. Vice Mayor Medina.
Yes, thank you, staff. Thank you, Ann. It was a pleasure meeting you yesterday downtown. I think that was yesterday, Mr. Mayor. Wasn't that yesterday, Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
So, and it's great that you're there to see it. It's been a long overdue amount of attention has been given to our downtown. Interesting enough, last night at the San Bruno Community Foundation, downtown was the #1 item that was brought forward from the community survey that was given of the community's interest in seeing improvement there. Easily, hands down, I think it was 280 comments, and the closest one behind it was at least 100 behind. So the interest is there. It's long overdue, and here we are. And the question, it was great, what can we do? I understand that there are some issues with culverts, but the culverts start north of Genevan, mid-block. And so on Genevan, from the Stormwater Master Plan, there are no culverts. So we could easily put trees in the ground there. I totally understand, and I'm in favor of hiring a landscape architect on call to address the many needs that are downtown. But in this first part, determining what species, with the wind, microclimates, all that, getting a professional to give us some guidance on that is most important. So if, as we proceed with that and doing the design, I would ask that we have something that's called a design build. So as you're working on the design, and you start on the south end as you're working north, without the problems we're going to have with the storm drain, you can pretty much move on those locations and continue doing the design, but getting the things in the ground first. It's an interesting word choice, cohesive. Our downtown isn't cohesive. It's eclectic, funky, different eras of architecture. I mean, I would quit using the word cohesive because it doesn't fit our downtown. It is its own eclectic vibe there with the variety, with the diversity. But nonetheless, 250,000 in design, I would like to see that broken down a little bit more. But I think we need this landscape architect to be involved with Centennial Plaza for the selection of those plants, of those trees, and in Posey Park. But I don't want to jump too far ahead, so I'll leave those comments there. And once again, thank you for the presentation.
Any other colleagues in regards to the greening and landscaping topic that was brought up? Councilmember Mason.
So for the greening and landscaping concept, I was just wondering what the cost, is there a scale of cost that we're looking at as well? And then I wanted to ask, when you're looking at what exactly is going to be planted, I know that one of the issues I've heard has been like a broken pipe of some sort for the pots that are existing. So is there anything that we can do to make sure that the plants are drought tolerant so that the beauty of the plants are not reliant on water? And then are we also looking at the maintenance of whatever it is that we are going to plant? We have been really short-staffed. We don't know how long that's going to last. What is staff looking at to ensure that the maintenance is minimal? So we'll start there.
City manager or director, would anyone like to comment on the last questions, please?
We're on mute. We'll have Ann Matola take the first part and I'll chime in later.
Great. I want to make sure I have all the questions. One of your first questions was the overall cost. That's actually that's within the scope of what we need a landscape architect to help us with, because again, until we know what we're dealing with, we really can't estimate the cost. So I don't mean to be vague or dodge that, but that's the reality of that situation. As far as the drought tolerant plants, sustainable maintenance, that is another thing that somebody with expertise can come in and help us with from the get-go, from the time it's planting. A lot of times what you'll do is you'll talk about, these are our resources. This is what we have to be able to maintain as far as staffing resources, and they can help design appropriately. And as far as drought tolerant, that is something that we actually look to implement. Drought tolerant doesn't necessarily mean it needs no water, but once it's established, it's much less of a burden on the water system. It doesn't necessarily impact maintenance, but it certainly helps with water use. Are those all the questions?
No, there was also the broken pipe question.
Well, that's actually, that answers it. The broken pipe, well, I mean, that would be an additional question that Mayor Medina, I think, is a good point, is there a cost associated, or are we interested in fixing that pipe? But the intention of my other question was just to make sure that it's drought tolerant, whatever it is that we get. But I think that's a good question, because my understanding is that that's one of the reasons there's been a delay.
Just to piggyback on that, I think connected to that question was Marty's question about the design build. Mm-hmm. And so the $250,000 is really our best professional guess on what it will cost to do the schematic design. Now we're going to have to do an RFP and get bids, and so we'll hone in on that number. But right now, this project is not funded, so we're not able to break down the cost. We will once we get bids from landscape designers. In regard to the design build, that's another contracting layer, and we would need to add additional funds to the project if we're going to design build, because we wouldn't want to use some of our design money to do installation. So should council want to look at that, I think we should take that on after we get the architect on board and get a better estimation upon how that relationship will work and exactly how much money we need to add.
So then in this particular portion of the, I guess, presentation, I'll call it, just so that I'm clear, what is it that you are requesting of us to direct staff on?
So with regard to greening and landscaping of downtown, should council want us to proceed, we would build in $250,000 into the proposed budget. Do not know at this point where that money will come from. We are currently in the process of our budget development, so I do not know if we'll have general fund money, and so we may be looking for other pots of funds to fund that from, potentially Measure G, potentially other funds. But as we're developing the budget, if this is a priority of council, that is the next step, is to actually put some money behind this project and try and fund it in the 21-22 budget.
Okay. And just confirming, we don't have any landscape architects in-house, correct? That I know of.
No, we have maintenance staff.
Okay, great. And just a thank you to Director Matola. I know you're fairly new and you've really jumped into this and a number of meetings I've been on with you. So I really appreciate the quick turnaround on some of these requests and just moving so quickly since you got in. So thank you so much.
Okay, next is the Vice Mayor, but Vice Mayor, Councilmember Salazar hasn't had an opportunity. I'd like to call on him next. Councilmember Salazar.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And so I just wanted to add my thanks to staff for bringing this next step a while back. And it's been a while now since we approved first funding the Streetscape plan. So that was a few years back, and there were concerns back then that we were going to spend money on the plan and then it would just sit on a shelf and it would never move anywhere. So I definitely appreciate staff's efforts to sort of keep some momentum behind that. We have the plan in place, and so seeing this come back to us in an incremental format, I think definitely gives us an opportunity to prioritize and look at things that are going to have an immediate impact. And so I don't have any specific questions about the greening and landscaping, but given all of the other things that we're looking at in this presentation, I would say that this is probably the biggest bang for the buck out of all of these. It's a price tag that looks reasonable, something that we could definitely work into a budget. If we could get additional funding from the outside, it would definitely make this very doable. And I think it would have a huge impact on the appearance of downtown. So out of all of the things that we're looking at, I think this is one that we definitely want to prioritize. So that was it for my comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Council Member. Let's go back to Vice Mayor Medina.
Yeah, I just wanted to, I had a couple other questions that I didn't ask earlier. Of the planters that are currently, I guess the pots there, how many of them have a functioning irrigation system?
My understanding is right now there's only one half block that doesn't have it. So most of them,
and it does, I'm sorry.
Yeah, so most of them are working.
And the ones that are not working, they're not working because of a blockage, because of a leak, or what, do we have an assessment of how long that block is and what's the cause of it?
I don't know that they've determined it yet. So my understanding is there's the team that works downtown that's been trying all the different plantings. They've repaired much of the irrigation. So a lot of the issues where there were leaks, breakages, and I don't know that they've determined if this is not repairable or if they just haven't gotten to it yet. I can find out.
That would be great to hear back on that, and that would definitely be important for our landscape architect to review. And I also wanted to thank Council Member Linda Mason, not just staff, because it's my understanding we wouldn't be talking about it today. This is Measure K funding that Linda was really pushing hard for, and we had a first study session, and this is the follow-up on that. So wanted to thank Linda for that, thank the council for their attention. But my last question, though, is in the potential funding sources, the amount in our development impact fees that we could use, those are one source. And how do we ask the San Bruno Community Foundation to move forward with a strategic initiative for a grant to do what has been identified in their survey as what our community wants?
I don't know if staff has, I'm sorry, Vice Mayor, are you concluded?
Yeah, that's pretty much it. Of like, what are the potential funding sources? And I think it's development impact fees. We could use those, and I'm not sure how much we have in there. Not very much, but we have a little bit. I thought that from 111 San Bruno Avenue we had $3 million. And how creative could we get if it's somewhat artistic? And well, we'll get to Posey Park later, but I'll leave it at that, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. And City Manager, when you respond to that, maybe we can be very clear. I don't want to mislead, or not mislead, but just there are no Measure K funds that are assigned for this. As the City Manager said, just so people think like, okay, well, it's paid for, so what are we waiting on? So it is about developing the budget, bringing it forward, finding the revenue source. It's for $250,000 at this time, but City Manager, as you're answering the Vice Mayor, I just want to be clear. For that $250,000, let's say council, which it seems we're all together on this, moving that forward, what does that mean after the $250,000 is spent? What will people see or not see?
Okay. There's a lot there. Let's try and unpack it. First question is, can we make an ask of the Community Foundation to fund a portion of this? Certainly staff can have those conversations. My understanding on the timing of where we're at right now, it would be off cycle. The council member Medina is correct that they did have a town hall just yesterday on their long-term strategic plan, and they reported on that number one was improving downtown. So pivoting and looking at a strategic grant to fund a portion of this effort is something that we can have conversations with them about. With regard to the $3 million for 111 San Bruno, that is not development impact fees. That is park and loop fees that cannot be used for downtown, that may potentially be able to be used for Posey Park and Centennial Plaza. Question mark, we're still looking into that. With regard to other development impact fees, it is unclear right now if we have development impact fee revenue that can be used for greening and improving the streetscape downtown. I know that that question is out there. I'm just not at a point where I can give you an answer on are there development impact fees to use for those funds. But based on council direction, we will forthrightly go about and try and fund this effort or these efforts should we receive council direction to do so. Lastly, with regard to what will $250,000 provide, that is our best estimate on what it would cost to do the professional design work coming from conceptual to schematic, a block by block design, looking at everything that Ann talked about, what type of plants, looking at the infrastructure, looking at exactly where, how large, etc. It was also brought up by Councilmember Medina to do a design build. Because staff is listening, they have reminded me that we cannot do a design build. Design build by state law or for public projects over $1 million. And so we likely will have to follow the normal process where you design, you have a specific design that you then bid out and you give that to a contractor to do. And I know that that means that this will go a lot slower than we all want it to go, right? Because we all want to put trees in the ground and make downtown beautiful yesterday. We will absolutely work as fast as we can. But I think we all agree, and we've talked about that designing it and having the right plan is important for the long run. So the trees grow to the right height and the right species, and the canopy is the right height, and they're drought tolerant, and we can water them and maintain them, and they survive. And so that's what we're talking about, is taking that appropriate next step to go on the block by block level design, and then totally understand council wants improvements as soon as possible. And so we will have the conversation with the designer about where can we begin once we know what the design is.
I think you got them all those addressed in your reply. Thank you. So what I'm hearing from all of us, and I'm going to talk in the third person, including myself, but that we are all in favor of the $250,000 as has been proposed and outlined for the greening and landscaping. Do I have that correct, colleague? Yes, yes, yes. Vice Mayor.
Just wanted to clarify, Mr. Mayor. So we have, this is of the $250,000 Measure K request. This is what started it all, right? It was my understanding that's what started this all, was Linda's request to pursue Measure K funding. And then we were told we had, we were told there's around 250,000. So if we're going to say all that Measure K funding is to do the greening, okay, but we're going to have to find money for everything else that we're going to talk about in Centennial Plaza and Posey Park. Is that correct?
So let's let the city manager clarify if that's okay.
Yeah, so let's clarify. Councilmember Linda Mason began with a council member comment to improve Posey Park. Council supported that. The concept was develop plans to improve Posey Park so there could be a request to the county and our county supervisors for Measure K funding for Posey Park. We are 3 tonight coming back to you with what staff has found and options for improving Posey Park. Based on where you decide, we can then make a formal ask for funding for Measure K for Posey Park. The 250K is a separate effort to hire a landscape architect to design a greening and landscaping plan for downtown schematic block by block design. We need to find funding for that. And we've talked about the foundation, we've talked about other pots of money that the city may have for that. So it's also worth noting that Posey Park came up because of the request from Councilmember Mason. We combined this study session to talk about the next level of the streetscape plan, because we've been talking about that through your council retreat. It's a strategic initiative. The council has stated that we really want to make progress on that. We did not make progress on that in 2020 due to COVID and funding and other things. So we wanted to use this opportunity to come to you and say, okay, well, we have the streetscape plan. We know it's conceptual. What can we do next year, right? It's I think over a $10 million effort to improve the entire streetscape. We don't have $10 million, but what can we do next year? And that's begin with the greening and landscaping plan. The other item of making improvements to Centennial Plaza is coming to you because that is developed as a staff initiative. As we're walking downtown, as we see that there needs to be improvements to Centennial, we're talking to businesses that would like some outside dining, and we began to have conversations with some of our landscape vendors saying, if we had funds, what could we do to make an immediate improvement to Centennial Plaza? And that's why you have that within this study session today. And so we decided to use the time to talk about all three items.
Okay. Vice Mayor, does that answer that? And then you had a follow-up question.
Right. I'm really glad I got that clarification. So thank you for that, City Manager. So I guess I could wait till we get to Posey Park.
Please.
So we'll go ahead. I think we should find $250,000 in our budget to proceed with this landscaping plan. So,
okay. So
I'm satisfied. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to go back to Councilmember Mason, but I have seen a verbal or head nodding, a thumb up, all 5 of us in concurrence. Councilmember Mason.
Yeah, I just wanted to thank Vice Mayor Medina for his kind words, but I do agree with City Manager Grogan that it started with the Posey Park and the conversation expanded from there. So just for the record, but it was Vice Mayor Medina, I think, who definitely, since even before I was on the council, has really been pushing for the greening of downtown. So I am hoping that we're going to be able to find a way to make all 3 of these possible sooner rather than later. One thing I do want to ask for is a commitment from the manager or the city manager that we have an update on where we are with this in 3 months. So if the landscape architect has not been actually procured and gotten within 3 months, then that you have to come back to council again to let us know, because I do want to make sure that this particular request is moving forward as quickly as possible.
And thank you for your comments. City Manager, I think you said you would work it into the budget. We don't vote on the budget until June. You have to find the money there. So in essence, we're in April. So May, June, then it hits July when the budget goes into effect July 1st. So in essence, he probably won't, my assumption, City Manager will verify, would not be prepared by July to say, already I think I could say today it would not be prepared by July. But maybe I'm incorrect. City Manager.
We will not be able to enter into contract until there's funding. As we sit right now, if we're able to fund it with city funds, that will come to you in the proposed budget. You will take action in June, and the money will be available July 1, and then we can identify and enter into contract with the vendor. Should we be able to get funding sooner from somewhere else, we may be able to do that. Do it sooner if the money becomes available sooner. Our normal process when we reach out to vendors is actually to have a funded project. now we've been talking to a lot of vendors, getting sort of what would this cost. But if we're going to ask for formal bids, we really need to have a funded project because they're going to do work to develop bids for us, and we need to know that we have the money to move forward. With regard to reporting back on progress, I do think that that is something, everything that we're talking about here is a strategic initiative of the city council, and I do think that that's an appropriate conversation that we can have at our Saturday retreat.
As well as I think in the strategic initiatives, we also talked about twice a year or about there was our discussions to have the initiative updates, right? Where are we at? How much percentage? Are we 25% through, 50%? Just so we have some way to gauge it. And there's a lot of them. So some kind of update, I think, is what the council had dialogued about than just once a year. So we see it, maybe at least twice. Okay, so once again, I'm going to reaffirm that on the greenery and landscaping, it is all 5 of us. They're saying, first, thank you to the director for her presentation and getting feedback from us. We appreciate it. And so direction is to go ahead with that. City manager, do you have the direction needed and for that?
Yes.
Okay.
When you're ready,
I'm sorry?
I said yes, and when you're ready, we should do Centennial and then Hope.
I've got that down, sir. So we're going to move on to the second item that in the presentation that came up, which was Centennial Park. As a reminder, as you saw some of the visual, and it was for $80,000. And the really quick, the one thing is, I know you talked about the time capsule. As folks all may know, if you looked at it, it's way ahead of schedule to be opened at this time. But have staff reached out to Rotary just to see, since they kind of, facilitated that, funded that. Has anybody reached out to them just to see what their thought is, or are you waiting for us for direction?
We're waiting for the city council for direction, but we would certainly contact Rotary, and as we move forward with the design, come up with an appropriate plan.
Perfect, thank you. All right, colleagues, on Centennial Park. Questions? Clarifying? If not, direction. Mr. Medina.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Centennial Plaza has been almost every time I walk past it has seen its best days years and years ago, and I'm glad we're looking at something there. For this 80,000, where is this 80,000 coming from? Maybe we start there. Are we talking about after we set the budget to figure out where to go? I'm sorry for that. I didn't really catch that. We have the funds for it?
So the proposed next steps is that we would strive to identify funding in the 2021 budget of $80,000. And so if we have sufficient general fund dollars, we will propose general fund, or we will look at other pots of money. One idea that was brought up tonight that we are looking into is using the park and lieu funds. Currently this is not a park. It is a closed-off area, and I'm not sure that we will be able to use those funds, but we are looking into the exact verbiage of the park and lieu fund, as well as the documents surrounding when Centennial Plaza was created and the bank was purchased and demolished and this plaza developed.
Got it. And Mr. Mayor, this is a temporary of the temporary solution that we have there, right? So is that staff's proposal that this is just a temporary thing?
So,
and let me. I'm sorry for asking the question and interrupting so fast, but in the streetscape plan, there was a little bit more elaborate. And so they were talking about how to stage and additional seating, and it was really going to be a programmable space, like and when I think of that, I would think of potentially having Shakespeare in our downtown on a little stage, or maybe having some people play music on that stage. So I'm okay with the shorter term because it's just dreadful there right now, but just kind of wanted to hear staff's kind of views on how far we're going with this.
So this was intended to be a quick win project to activate that area, open it up for both planned outdoor dining should one of the local restaurants like to utilize that space, but also have tables for where people can take their takeout and do outdoor dining there. We were really looking for a quick win project, sort of something that we could do. But the plan is to do it nice enough where it can stand the time, and that could be Centennial Plaza. Should we ever have funds and want to re-envision it, absolutely, the streetscape plan included things like that, and we can look at having a more programmed space there. But actually, why don't I turn it over to the director for her additional thoughts?
Yeah, so I need to echo, I think it was really important to all of us, and especially being downtown now and getting to know some of the people that are actually working there, the opportunity to have a rather significant quick win. It's really important, and you can tell it's really important to the community. There is, in the streetscape plan, I've been looking at the different options, and it was really a lovely activated urban park. The issue is that there's significant work. It's a very costly proposition to be able to transform it to the vision in the streetscape. There's excavation of foundation that remains there from the building that was raised, and so there's the cost difference to wait until we can do the execution to that plan is rather substantial. So I think when you have the park and it's activated and it's used, it is a temporary fix. What we're putting there is no hardscape, so it's actually easily removed should funding become available for us to do the greater, more permanent vision of the park.
Do we have any rough estimates on putting a fully activated Centennial Plaza?
No, staff has not done any of that work to estimate, but what I would tell you at a high level, the professionally designed and executed downtown plazas are in the millions.
Yeah.
It's not a $500,000 project. They're often $1 to $5 million projects.
But that wasn't identified in our streetscape plan as a $1 or $5 million project, right?
The streetscape plan was roughly a $20 million plan. If memory serves me correctly, it was almost $10 million for parks and plazas and $10 million for the streetscapes. I'm not sure that it was a granular breakdown on
Okay.
Centennial.
Okay. I'm in favor of some activation there, but we for 80,000, and I'm hesitating because I'm thinking about our downtown. I've been thinking about it a lot, and I appreciate all the effort here. It's way more than was been done for years, so I sincerely thank everybody for that. When I was first elected, I was put on a downtown improvement committee, and we met one time. We'd had one council meeting, a walk through downtown, and I think that was it. So I really think we need to reform a downtown improvement subcommittee. We did it for the rec center. We need to be able to kind of track these things, provide our input. I understand staff really busy. These subcommittees don't have to meet with staff all the time, but I think it's that important. And clearly from this survey, it's what's on people's minds. And I think the council should be more involved with that. So maybe later on in the meeting, but I just wanted to bring it up now because I didn't want to save it to the end. But I think we need to have a downtown improvement committee and not just looking at the greening, but looking at the murals and looking at the lights. And I understand, yeah, we don't have money for all that, but the smaller things that we can do, that we need to be talking about it. And I love that we're talking about it tonight. So please don't take this in the wrong way. But I think our community really wants to see us do something there, and the council needs to be more involved. So, Mr. Mayor, at some point tonight, I hope that you can consider my request to have a subcommittee. I'd be happy to serve on it, but I don't need to serve on it. I just want us to do it, and I want us to be more involved, and I want to see more things done there. And I understand it costs more money, but we need to prioritize that, and our community wants it.
And what I would probably say, the city attorney will say, we can't form or appoint anything tonight. It was not on the agenda. And then Vice Mayor, maybe I need to, we can talk and walk just as far as, are we talking about these topics? Are we talking about subsequent topics? Just so, because I know staff will say, well, all five of you gave direction, but now two of you
No, I get that. Yes,
yeah,
sir.
So we can talk.
Right.
And then,
we can agendize the actual scope of the improvement, downtown improvement.
Yeah. What your thoughts are, yeah.
Committee. Yes, sir. Okay, I'm good. Thank you.
All right. Thanks, Marty. And then we can circle back with the city manager. Councilmember Mason.
Thank you. So I guess I want to compare this, if I can, to Florida Park. Is it fair to say that my interpretation is right? There's no request here for funding to get consultants to create a new plan. This is really a request for direction to say, this is how much money we think we can minimally do something to open the park up and make it usable. And I think if that's what staff is asking for, then I definitely support it, because we see the vast difference of Florida Park before and after our own staff got involved and assisted in beautifying it. So I just want to make sure that that's accurate.
Yes, Councilmember Mason, this is intended to be a quick win. And we would employ the services of a landscape contractor that can do the work with minimal direction, because we're talking about plantings and decomposed granite walkways and some sort of a portico and table. So really quick win effort without sort of the large scale design build aspect.
Okay, and I would say, given the cost, if I don't remember off the top of my head whether Florida Park went to budget last year or not, but if it's something that can be done even sooner than the budget cycle, I would highly encourage and support that. Thank you.
Councilmember Hamilton, then Councilmember Salazar.
Okay, so I am also supportive of this. This is a great interim, long-term interim, I guess is a good way to put it, solution for this space. I would like to see us, down the road, come back to do a more permanent, grander plan once we have funding for it. But this is exactly the right thing to do now. One point I want to bring up, and I purposely waited until after Councilmember Mason went, because I thought she would bring this up, is can we make a plan for the holiday tree? We're not going to be able to have a tree lighting in the park.
That's next.
Well, so I was wondering if putting a tree in a holiday tree in Centennial Park as an interim would be, I think that would be a good place for it, because it's right in the middle of downtown. You would see it when you're coming down Genevan. And that's something I think we might want to consider for to build into the design, and it would only be obviously just for a few years while the rack is being constructed. The only other point is, and I'm really getting into the weeds, but this is we're talking about it. As part of the work, I would hope that we also be able to find a better solution for maintaining the water level in the fountain than what is there today, because that's not good and a little embarrassing. So those are my comments. I'm definitely supportive of this.
Councilmember Salazar.
Thank you. So my concern every time we talk about Centennial Plaza is just, what is the longer term vision for that section of downtown? And when that building was acquired many, many, many years ago, I don't think it was ever intended to be preserved as a public space. It was sort of an interim step. It was purchased with redevelopment funds and intended to be at some time possibly packaged into a bigger project. And I think there's still potential there where we may want to consider, as we redevelop downtown, to package that lot into a bigger development, a bigger project, and whether that's going to end up being an entry to a downtown parking garage or part of a new development like we've seen at both of the anchor points. I think that we have to consider that as still the longer term potential for this property and what we intend to do with downtown. As a public space, I think strategically it's in a good location, and so if that is the direction we decide to go in, I don't think it would necessarily be a bad decision, but I don't know if it necessarily plays in with that broader vision that we have for developing downtown, and having a little pocket park in the middle of all that may not be the best use of it. So it sounded, I heard the response to Marty's questions, and it sounds like this is definitely going to be designed as a temporary, easily removed thing, so that if and when those other plans do materialize, we'll be able to reprogram that and put it back into something that's more usable. At $80,000, it's definitely a good investment in making that area look nice in the interim. I know that the current setup there was done practically at no cost, done by city staff at very minimal cost, because it was an empty lot that the city owned, and so it was beautified and looked really nice at first. It's definitely gotten a little shabby over time, and so maybe an investment to just kind of keep it going in the interim would be a good infusion there. But again, I think we have to consider that the long-term use of that was never really intended for that, and if we do start talking about more permanent plans, that we are then impacting the other vision that was kind of the original vision for that area.
Yeah, and Councilmember Salazar is right on the history. It was Wells Fargo City purchased it to have skin in the game, to be for my time, but it was to say, hey, we're part of San Mateo Avenue, so let's be on it together. Then, as it was said, the Wells Fargo facility came down. The foundation still remains, so you would have to go underneath for something of more permanency. And Councilmember Salazar is correct. That was done with city staff, no consultants, no outside architects or design, and it was done with items, whether it was the fountain, trees, and vegetation that we already had in-house. So it was done very nominally, because what it was a high chain link fence that got the newspapers against it with the winds, and the weeds on the other side of the fence. So that's what it was for a time. And so this was supposed to be temporary. And so it is from redevelopment is how we acquired it. And I know sometimes my understanding could be incorrect, but there are some rules as far as it being open space, and that I don't know if we could erect the building, but they talked about using it as a drive-through into the back parking, or to, as the council member said, to have something more long-term. And I see Vice Mayor Medina and then Council Member Hamilton. Switch.
Sorry, I just got a call, but I had it. Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I mean, that's really, really important. I think at some point we need to have that discussion of what legally we are bound to do with that property, with it being purchased with those funds. So maybe when do we have that discussion? And what are we going to do with that property in the long term? And maybe that's another discussion to have. I'll leave that with the city manager, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councilmember Hamilton.
So I should have framed my statement about the holiday tree more of as a question, which is would it be feasible to do it would obviously, likely be an artificial tree because we would want to use it for 3 to 4 years while the rack is being constructed. Would it be feasible to display a holiday tree in Centennial Plaza just while the park is under construction, and we likely wouldn't do a tree lighting in the park?
Yes. Should I respond to that?
Yes.
So we will absolutely look into the cost for that and bring it back. That's a really ideal location.
Thank you.
And sorry, I didn't realize I was on mute when I'm telling you, please respond. I apologize. Vice Mayor Fedita.
Yeah, I wanted to express my support for that. Of course, it always comes down to money, but we got to have a tree lighting somewhere, and having a downtown would be nice for a change, right?
Okay.
Thank you.
Well, let's not get beyond, but so what I'm hearing, and I want to reaffirm that for the 80,000, as kind of was outlined in that diagram, is that there is concurrence. Mr. Hamilton concurs, and I want you to please stop me and correct me. Councilmember Mason concurs, Councilmember Salazar, Vice Mayor Medina. All concur? Okay, I've gotten acknowledgements and favorable from all 5. Let's move on to the final of the 3, Posey Park. And as you know, folks, as a reminder, it had from various options from 85,000 up to 2 million. So talk about what to ask for Christmas, and boy, there is a range of costs. So I think you had saw kind of the various options. Would the option ideas be best to be brought back up on the shared screen for everybody to see them again? Could we please bring up share the screen and have the 5 options so everybody can see those? Or would help us too, I think, to keep on. Thank you. And I think everybody knew option 5 is the 2 million, which was quite substantial. So with that, questions, comments? Councilmember Mason. You're on mute.
So thanks for putting this together again. Our city manager has probably been hearing about this all year on our one-on-one, so thank you, Javon. I guess I wanted to say that I like number 4. I'm really unclear as to why a fountain was built at all. I think just about every city is going away from fountains. So I think we need an option that doesn't include a fountain. The landscaping we need, obviously. And then I really like 4 because it has the expanded mural option. And given that we have, and I don't know the limitations on this, but I think between a tentative measure K request that I confirmed today is still an option on the table, in addition to the funds that the Arts and Culture Committee has, which I'm not saying it would be all their funds, but maybe to fund a mural. I definitely think we have some viable options. And then I also wanted to throw in there that Councilmember Hamilton and I were walking this weekend, and that's how the holiday tree idea came up. And I was actually going to mention it for this park. I've gone back and forth with Centennial Park, but the reason that I would like to highlight it, and I spoke with City Manager Grogan about this last year during COVID, thinking maybe people can come outside with their masks on. But it was the pandemic, I think, was just too heightened at the time. But the reason I like Posey Park for it is because I'll never forget what a commissioner told me from another city, which was that when they get on Caltrain, they pass San Bruno, and they said, Linda, you got to give us something to stop for. And San Bruno's got to give us something to stop for. And the idea of having a lit tree and maybe even a lighting ceremony with some vendors, with some hot chocolate. It really could liven up what's the beginning of our downtown, beginning or end, depending on what side you're seeing it. So I have already submitted that request as part of our strategic planning for Saturday. So I don't want to veer too much, but I would support option 4, and either for a holiday tree, but I do like this one just because of the Caltrain passing by here. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Salazar.
Thank you. Actually, out of all of them, it really seems like maybe 5 would be the one to shoot for if we really want to do something with that area. I agree with Linda that a fountain was probably a bad idea when we decided to do it in the first place, and so spending money on waterproofing and restoring what's going to be a fountain doesn't seem like a good investment of money to me. And it sounds like any of these options are going to require us basically to put throwing good money after bad by trying to repair what's there. So I really don't like that idea of having to sort of continue building on that on a poor design that was put in place. So I think if we're going to do it, we should do it right. I think trying to fix what's there is only going to end up looking kind of half-baked. Definitely don't want to do another fountain there. If we do the planning and we have to break up what's there, it seems like we're halfway toward this other thing. So I realize that the $2 million is probably well beyond what we had initially started scoping, and it puts us into a whole different ballgame. But I'm not crazy about any of those other options.
Councilmember Hamilton.
So, one question, and I may have known this at one point, and I apologize. So, was this the fountains and the current design of the park designed and built solely by the city of San Bruno, or in partnership with Caltrain as part of the Caltrain station? Let's start with that question, if that's okay.
Unfortunately, the staff members that are here do not have the history to answer that definitively. With all the research that we've done and seeing the various designs that came forward to the city and options presented to the city council, I think the best answer that I can give you is that it was in partnership. Because I know in looking at prior staff reports and draft versions that we have, that there were several models that were talked about and reviewed internally.
Right. And Councilmember Hamilton, I'm going to go off memory, and that's never a wise thing, so keep it with that. Is for all council, there was going to be 2 fountains, first of all. So council said, let's just do one. There was going to be one on the east side. So look at the bright side. There's 1 fountain, not 2. And my understanding is for the grade separation, most all of it was funded through grants that were, I think, up to 2014. There was over $100 million that was paid for. The city paid almost nothing. The only thing it was going to go in partnership was the arch, which became astronomical, from 500 to $1 million that they wanted from the city, and then from their part, and we said stop. So then when the punch list was achieved, then it was being turned over to city to maintain. That's my memory, but Councilmember Salazar may remember as well. So sorry.
That's how I remember.
Councilmember Hamilton, just wanted to give you a little more history.
So I'm sorry. I thought you were going to speak, Councilmember Salazar, but you're concurring with what Rico is saying.
Correct. Yeah, that's exactly how I remember it.
Cool, thank you. Because the reason that I ask is that, with the problems that are happening in the fountain, that's not very long. It's not that old, considering that this was a municipal structure that was built. And I'm just wondering if we have any legal recourse to go back to Caltrain for some help on taking care of this problem financially. And I don't know if that's anything that we've looked at or considered or whatever, but because obviously that would change the conversation on what options we should look at going forward.
Mr. Mayor, I'd be happy to chime in on that.
I was waiting for you to.
I was looking at your box there, Mr. City Attorney.
City Attorney.
Sure. So some council members may recall that this was the subject of very lengthy and difficult negotiations between the city and the Joint Powers Board that spanned, I would say, a variety of years. Several years. We went into mediation with a professional mediator over a lot of issues having to do with the construction of the park, including defects, punch list, things that should have been completed but weren't, and so on and so forth, and the arch. So the result of that was a settlement agreement many years ago that resolved all the claims in exchange for a variety of concessions that the JPB made. But the bottom line is there's no opportunity now for additional recourse against Caltrain or JPB with respect to the park.
Okay, so I don't imagine that the structural problems that we're seeing in the fountain were on that punch list, because we didn't know about it then. This is something that failed years later, but you're saying that the settlement that we entered into basically said that park is yours and we're never going to worry about it again, and we agreed to that. Right.
Actually, some of the problems with fountain were evident even at that time as a result of the construction, and I don't have the settlement agreement in front of me and can't recall all of the details. It was quite a while ago. In any event, it resolved all of the city's claims about both what was known at that time and also any unknown claims that might have already accrued, as is common for basically all settlement agreements.
Okay, I will stop beating that dead horse. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, so then looking at the options there, I'm also not in favor of a fountain. I think I agree with a lot of with everything that both Councilmember Mason and Councilmember Salazar said about the fountain, and I also think that having a large water feature running sends the wrong message, given our propensity for drought. That's not going to go away. So I also agree with Councilmember Salazar that option 5 would be the best thing. It would be the best final outcome. What I worry about, though, if approving option 5 is that because there isn't a pot of $2 million laying around to fund that nothing would happen in the short or even medium term. So I guess my question is, I know a lot of what's in option 4 is in option 5 or vice versa. And is there a way to proceed with option 4 while still keeping option 5 on the table as a long-term goal?
Sure. So a few things there. Before answering, I think it's worth pointing out that in option 4 can include no fountain and only landscaping and murals. And so just want to point that out. Is there a way to proceed with option 4 and still proceed with option 5? Unfortunately, not, because it would essentially be a waste of funds to do the restoration of the fountain and the waterproofing, where option 5 is really re-envisioning the entire plaza, which may include demolition of that. And so I think the best way to break up the options is 1 through 4 is reusing the existing infrastructure in some fashion, fountain or no fountain. Option 5 is a complete revisiting that will begin with a park designer, landscape architect.
Okay, thank you. So given all of that, I think I would be in favor at this time of going with option 4. Just because I don't I think with everything else and all the various priorities happening, that option 5 would end up on the shelf for quite a while. So that's my thought.
Any other questions or comments from colleagues?
Mr. Mayor?
Yes, Vice Mayor.
I'm sorry I didn't get a chance to raise my hand. Clearly, and I agree with all the council members about there's no point of a fountain there anymore. And my suggestion is that as we revise option 4 and that cost would go down in option 4, if we're not going to restore the structure. And this is the opportunity where a landscape architect could really help us. I believe I heard there was 18 inches of depth, and a landscape architect could tell us what plants would thrive there. I'm guessing some of the succulent type that really don't have extensive roots, and they really don't take up much water either. And I think they really do well here in San Bruno. So how to get some information from that procured service. Murals could also be attached. It does not be painted on the actual wall. It could be on wood or other media, and then adhered to or bolted to the walls there, just so that it doesn't look so bland and so nasty. So, and then when it comes down to option 5, yeah, that's always the great thing to have a brand new park with all those great bells and whistles. But we have a serious financial difficulty doing a lot of things. So if we can get grants, of course, yeah. And how much? And then again, where's that money going to come from? Grants could pay so much, and we need to put our part. And our city has so many needs. I think staff could come back with some refinement on those costs, and it's good to have big dreams, but we don't have the money for them right now. You know, there's another 20 million across our downtown that we don't have. But I do love the possibility of putting something down there for Christmas. And I'll go ahead and add this. When people are coming off the train, it's not just there that they're looking down. You know, as you're looking across, there's a number of issues there that need additional cleanup and code enforcement that has been going on for way too long. You know, we've had a contractor utilizing the former Hanlon Tire as a yard. So I'm straying. Thank you very much for that. So Posey Park, yeah, I'm good. Thank you.
I saw a 4, and then Councilmember Salazar.
I just wanted to rebut some of what Marty just said, because we don't have money for any of these options. To be honest, none of these are funded. And so we're talking about what direction do we want to take on this? And so we're going to be looking for funding to do any of these. And if we actually go with the more ambitious option 5, which would actually turn this into somewhat of a park with usable recreation area, that actually opens up those park and lieu funds to us, which wouldn't be the case with any of the other options. So, you know, if we're just talking about, you know, scrambling to get $500,000 and only, you know, putting a coat of paint and some plants in a broken fountain, then I don't think that's a good use of our money. And if we're going to go out and try to find the funds anyway, let's look at actually putting something usable here. And maybe we could just ignore the fountain for now, fix it so that it's presentable, and really start focusing on what's happening in front of that fountain, which is the area that could be usable. Used to be a park there. Now there's no grass or anything, well, except for that little mound. But maybe focus on doing something there and then coming back to repairing the fountain area as downtown starts evolving and more funds become available from that development.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes,
Yeah.
Vice Chairman?
Yeah, Councilmember Salazar, we're really not too far off. You're not rebutting anything. We don't have the money, so I do agree with you that if we were to get the money, that would be great. Is this a park? First of all, let's clarify. Posey Park in the day wasn't much of a park at all. It was just a little bit of grass with a couple trees. And then when we went ahead and realigned San Mateo Avenue, we split it, and we had to cut those beautiful trees down. But it wasn't really much of a park ever. But let me ask staff: is Posey Park a real park in our city's eyes?
City manager did have his hand up probably for prior conversation, and maybe he can also answer that as he speaks.
Thank you, Mayor Medina. I rolled my hand with regard to Councilmember Salazar's comment, and I think it'll address Marty's as well. Improvements to Posey Park are currently not funded. What we're talking about is defining an option and identifying funding. One potential funding source for Posey Park, which is a park, is our Park and Loop Fund that does have $3 million in it. And so we could potentially fund some, if not all of these options, if that is where we wanted to direct those funds. Now, there are other needs, as we know, across the city for those Park and Loop funds. And we could spend $3 million like that on various other parks. And we had been identifying a significant amount of those Park and Loop funds to help out with the Aquatic and Rec Center. Now that we've actually had the bid opening for the Park and Rec and the new Park and Rec Center, and we received good bid pricing, that does open up those Park and Loop funds that we were already reserving $1 million out of in our budget estimations for other parks citywide to go towards Posey Park or other areas. So it's really a council policy decision. When we talked about the challenges with using the Park and Loop funds earlier, I want to be clear, that was on Centennial Plaza. Because Centennial Plaza right now is not a technical park. It is a temporary plaza from a former redevelopment parcel, and it's essentially a holding place because we have been, we did a temporary installation there, and it has not been open. That is not a park by city definition. Posey Park, however, is a park. And so one option that is available to the city council is to carve out the $500,000 for option 4 or any of the other options. And we can look to fund those through the budget process. In addition, it's worth clarifying, I think, a comment that Councilmember Medina made, and that we could revise a $500,000 figure if we do not do a water feature. The $85,000 for restoration of the surface and waterproofing is needed whether we do planning or a fountain, because the plants actually have to drain too. So we would need to repair the concrete, the exposed rebar, waterproofing, whether we were reactivating the fountain or doing plants. And so we do think option 4 is approximately $500,000. And of course, as we bring on the landscape architect and design it, the cost will come more into alignment, but that is our current estimate. I hope that answers the open questions.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
Yeah, I just wanted to acknowledge and thank our city manager for that. That was pretty important clarity provided.
Councilmember Mason.
Yeah, I was wondering if you can go back to slide 5, option 5. So I'm wondering why we didn't have a schematic for options 1 through 4 to see what those would compare to.
Great. So again, remember this project started with council direction to look into potential improvements in Posey Park. Not funded. These beautiful pictures you see before you came out of the adopted streetscape plan, which cost approximately $130,000 in a landscape architect design. What you have on the prior slide is staff's investigation and professional guess on what these options will cost. And so there is no funded project for improvements to Posey right now to bring you to the sort of beautiful images you see here.
Okay, so then this option 5 is going to include, when it says complete renovation, it's going to be all new concrete?
Think of this as option 5, as a re-envisioning of Posey Park. We will enter into contractual services with a park designer. We will have community engagement. We will have input, and we will re-envision what Posey Park is. And it will be intentional placement.
I think so. I'm not, I think what I'm having a hard time grasping is that it's unclear to me what more we're getting for $1.5 million. So I'd like to better understand, because you're talking about taking money from, like you said, $3 million could go fast. Florida Park could have been done by now, right? And so I think that when we're looking at how we're strategically placing our money, I want to make sure that we have some kind of rhyme or reason to what we're doing, while also finishing projects. I mean, I feel like we're starting a lot of projects, and that should not be long term, and I want to make sure that we're going to finish them. So I think I'm having a hard time here grasping what I'm getting for the $2 million that I'm not getting for the $500,000. And I know parks cost a lot of money, that's not lost on me, but it would really help to understand what that difference in cost is.
So if you could go back to the prior slide again. So I think what's really important to understand between the difference, again, all of these use this existing structure. So no matter what we do, you're going to see the massive wall. When you're at the plaza, it's very interesting when you take pictures of it. It doesn't seem to have that same, I will say, oppressive impact as when you're there, and it's just this wave of this beige kind of wall. We're not going to activate the fountain. There's a whole stepped area, which will end up just being this odd stepped area. We can't make any of this go away. And so I think it's really important, the expectation that these solutions may soften what's there, but to really transform it. Mm-hmm. It doesn't do that. It repurposes certain elements by cladding it with public art, by softening it in certain areas with plantings, but even the expectation of the plantings that we put there, you're looking at things which are a lower level and still don't have the grandeur of trees. So if you look at 5, what it does is, what the streetscape attempted to do is really to repurpose that whole area. And when as I'm reading it from the plan view, you can kind of see that the fountain isn't a fountain, right? It's this wall. It looks like a living garden in the picture. So it's very green. It's a shaded area. It's a place which is more inviting to gather. It doesn't have the starkness. So the first 4 options, no matter what we do, it's still going to be a very broad apron of a concrete plaza with some cool treatments and cladding, if you will, to that big concrete structure that's there. So I really think the expectation of what we spend the money on, it's different. So we can kind of dress it up. We can soften what's there for up to $500,000, but to truly transform the space where it feels more like a park setting is the higher price tag. I will also add that, so regardless of what we do, I do think, we're moving towards this. Let's bring in an expert. Let's bring somebody in that knows material use, the species, the plantings. So they would render a plan. They may be able to render 2 options. The interesting thing about parks and park funding, if I have a plan, like your park funding that comes up and you can apply for grants to transform spaces, and you can always do what we're trying to do now, plating it, but just understanding the way park grants go, you're more attractive a candidate if you have a shovel-ready plan for a concept that's ready to go to construction docs. So the 2 million option gives us the ability to really re-envision it so it's a usable space. 1 through 4 is pretty much just softening a structure that's there, which is no longer functioning as its intended use.
No, very, very helpful. Thank you. And for 5, then, so I missed it, I think, earlier until you just said this right now. So if this rendering came right out of the streetscape plan, then that means that this $2 million is part of the overall budget given to the streetscape plan that the council approved. Is that right then? So it's not like you're going to have the budget that's in the streetscape plan and then it's going to be like, oh, this is $2 million, which is more than had been anticipated as part of the plan. This is part of the overall budget and the phasing. Is that right?
No. So the streetscape plan was not funded. So there is no budget for the streetscape plan. The streetscape plan was a conceptual document, and if memory serves me correctly, we hired a firm, WRT, and I think that was like $130,000 plan. The plan was done, council accepted the plan. It's a $20 million plan. It was never funded. And so there's no identified funding to follow through on implementation. This would be a carve out of that plan to look at making a new $2 million ballpark at Posey Park, or reutilizing the existing infrastructure for a modified version of what's there.
So sorry, I don't think maybe I wasn't clear on the question. So I understand that the money is not budgeted, the $20 million, but it was broken down into phases. And so this slide, if it came out of the streetscape plan, then the 20 million should be out of the 20 million that had been estimated. And that's my question. Is this a whole separate, out of the $20 million, or is this part of that $20 million?
It would be a part of the $20 million. But I want to caveat that it wouldn't necessarily be exactly what was envisioned in the streetscape plan, right? The streetscape plan was 30,000 feet level, and then we would employ the services of a landscape designer and park designer to re-envision essentially a $2 million park.
So is that a yes?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Because I'm going to start getting worried if none of these numbers are part of the envisioned streetscape plan. Okay, thank you for answering those questions.
Councilmember Hamilton.
So a lot of my questions were answered by Director Matola's very complete answer to Linda's question. So looking at all this and learning about the park and lieu fund and what we potentially could use and all of that, I'm with Councilmember Salazar. I don't like the idea of dressing up what's here if we can do it correctly. But I also don't like the idea of adopting a plan that can't be funded for many years. I don't think we're there. I don't think that's going to happen given what's coming in the future. And I would be supportive of option 5 if we were going to fund it through a combination of things. Some of our park and lieu fund, some make an application to the county for Measure K funding. Maybe funding from other sources to bring it all together. That would be, and if that's something that's feasible that we can get started on, getting the being able to do the short-term funding to do the design, to make a shovel-ready project that makes it easier to get grants for, so that we're ready to do it, I would be supportive of that.
Okay, I'm going to go to Councilmember Salazar, and then we're going to go to Rico Medina.
Okay, thank you. So, and I'm a huge proponent of not taking on projects that we can't finish. That was really my big opposition the last time we met about what option we were going to choose for the bike lane, because I really felt that going for one that had no identified funding source made no sense, and our chances of success were very limited. But as Linda, I think, deduced here through her questioning, this is part of a plan that we've already approved. We're committed to this, and that what was in the Streetscape plan is what we're talking about now, versus trying to do a short, quick win, to use Javon's words, trying to get a quick win out of this. And if it is a quick win that will eventually be torn down to make way for our ultimate vision, then it's not a good use of our monies in the short term. So, if we're going to go ask for Measure K funding, and if it's something we could use at Centennial, and it's not something that we can pull out of Park and Lieu, then I think we go that route, and maybe just stay the course on this, look at it long term. If we make the investment, let's make it in the initial design and start moving that streetscape plan forward, rather than looking at quick, shortcuts.
City Manager, you have your, in that room, has a hand up. I know, Councilmember Mason, I'd like to be able to go ahead of Councilmember Mason if possible, since I haven't had an opportunity yet. The City Manager, though, please.
Sure. A couple comments. And I want to sort of go back a little bit to when this topic first came up. What I mentioned to Council is absolutely we can look into ways to quickly reactivate or make some improvements to Posey Park, and it was based on Council Member Linda Mason's conversations with the county under the sort of guise that there may be somewhere around $200,000, maybe $300,000 worth of Measure K funding for this. But what I also have always cautioned Council about is, let's not look at things in a vacuum. Because if we are sort of zeroing in on option 5 because we're thinking, let's fund it with Park and Lieu, I really think that question really needs to go in context with your capital budget planning discussion, where you're looking at all of your park needs across the city. Because that is right now, our only pot of money that we have within our discretion to improve our parks. And the needs in our park system far outstrips every dollar in there. And so I just want to be clear that we should not sort of make a decision to go with option 5 because we're thinking, there's $3 million in that fund, and then that pulls that out. Because, for example, we applied for a grant for Florida Park. If we do not get that Florida Park, that grant, and I think Florida Park, remind me, is 2.5 million ballpark, the council may say, well, the highest use of that is the $3 million that we have in Park and Lieu. Or we're going to put some here and some for our other park needs, and we all know those needs. And so I just want to remind council that this conversation did begin really with how can we make some quick improvements to Posey Park, because there may be the possibility to obtain $200,000 to $300,000 worth of grant funds. That said, absolutely re-envisioning the park as identified in the streetscape plan for a $2 million or more park is something that would absolutely be very beautiful and something that we may want to go down as a city. But I want to make it clear that there may or may not be the near-term funding for that, depending on what you decide when you're looking at the totality of the projects and the needs and the funding. It's also worth noting that while it is true that we could potentially obtain grant funds for placemaking and making this a new park, absolutely grants may come up. What's also true is that this is right now less of a neighborhood park and more of a entry plaza for our train station. And under that, guys, our ability to get transportation funding or grants related to transportation and infrastructure, we typically do not factor high on that scale, because this is not the type of park in a underserved neighborhood that meets the criteria, for example, that we were able to meet with Florida Park. When we looked at the Prop 68 funding, the park grant funding, Florida Park was an area that qualified, but other areas in the city did not qualify. And we would have to sort of, if we're gonna look to fund this through grants, we would have to make sure that it's a park that will be looked at as beneficial or meeting the grant criterias that are out there. And as it's currently configured as more of a entry point to the train station, it may not fare high in grant funds. And I know that was a lot, but I just wanna make sure that we understand the totality of what we're talking about when we're getting into option 5, and the timing at which we might have the funds to fully do that full build out may not be immediate.
Okay, real quick, because I'm going to assume that's not a good thing to do, but Councilmember Mason and Vice Mayor Medina may have just a follow-up question or comment on that, and then so let me defer to Councilmember Mason and Vice Mayor Medina if we could start to wind this up, because I think we've all had a good dialogue. Councilmember.
Oh no, you can go ahead, Mayor.
No, please, Councilmember, please.
I can wait.
Can I go then? Were you still waiting for me?
Absolutely, Vice Mayor Medina and then Councilmember Mason.
Yeah. And so I went back and watched the study session for these 250K. And we had the 4 options, right? City park improvements, plenty of things there, the library, downtown in general, and then Posey Park. I voted along on Posey Park, but my concern was it was going to cost too much money for $250,000 to do much there, which winds up being pretty much the case. I heard loud and clear what our city manager said. We have millions of dollars in improvements needed at our city parks. All of them could use a little bit more love and money. And we haven't yet even came up to that discussion and heard from the Park and Rec Department, the Park and Rec Commission on their recommendations on where is the need in San Bruno for parks, right? So when this opportunity came up, 250,000, yeah, hey, great, let's go ahead and go for it. Well, it's a lot more money than 250,000. It'd be great to have the big plan, but at this point, what are we going to do? And I think we should focus on that, and we don't have the money right now. So we go back and look at budget. We go back and look at what other parks needs there are, and we set a priority, because we always got to set priorities. And this weekend, there's another opportunity to set priorities for all of the city, and we need to do that. So I'm ready to listen to what our mayor has to say.
Okay, I'm going to give Councilman.
Or Linda, sorry.
That's all right. I just want to get Councilman Mace, because I'm going to try to wind it up and then solidify kind of where we're at. And so that might help me to go last to make sure we're all on the same, or kind of directing on a good page. Councilman,
please. I think, so I think that keep in mind that one of the reasons that Posey Park was a reason for the Measure K funds, or the argument was that it's connected to a Caltrain station, which the county uses. So there is a stronger argument for Measure K funds when you link it to the county, because they're meant for county funds. So it doesn't mean that cities haven't received those funds. I believe one of the cities in down the peninsula or up the peninsula received almost $1 million for their park. There's a number of gives similar to that. But I did just want to say that that was one of the reasons that my focus was intentionally around Posey Park, was really to improve our chances of getting the funds and hopefully more funds. And then I did want to ask, with the development that's coming from YouTube and some of these other sources, how quickly can that Park in Lieu fund be replenished?
The Park in Lieu fund will not be replenished. The Park in Lieu fee was eliminated when we created a comprehensive set of development impact fees. And so money will go for new development into development impact fees, and there is a portion of development impact fees that can be used for park and construction. I know that's a nuanced question, but sort of think about it as a $3 million in the Park in Lieu fund, that the 1-1 San Bruno that paid that roughly $3 million, that's the last project that I believe that will pay into that fund. All of the other new development that will pay development impact fees, and there's a portion of development impact fees for community parks. So the answer to your question is, how soon will we receive development impact money to improve our parks? Unfortunately, I cannot answer that question. The next projects up that will pay significant funds into the development impact fees will very likely be commercial projects. So that's YouTube phase 1, and that will come before the city council later on this year when they decide to build phase 1, and those payments are due, I believe, at building permit issuance, and so that's at least a year from entitlement. And so we may be talking about 24 months if that project proceeds rapid. There's improvements at the Sears building and a potential redevelopment there, likely 2 years away before those fees are complete. So I would say there's several years before there are significant development impact dollars paid to do significant park improvements.
Okay. Yeah, I do remember when that change happened, and I was assured that there were still going to be money going specifically to parks. So I'm glad to hear that. Okay, thank you.
You and Councilmember Hamilton, you're going to be important because I have you kind of on two different options, so it might be good to hear from you.
Well, actually I just had a clarifying question on the impact fees. City Manager, you said that a portion of those can be used for parks. What is that portion? Is it a set percentage? You know, every dollar that comes in, you know, X cents goes to parks, and this much goes to water and sewer or whatever. How does that work?
There's a detailed explanation of that, and I will not try and do it from memory because I will not get it correct. But at a high level, our development impact fees have several buckets. One for infrastructure, one for parks. There's I believe 5 different buckets where the money goes into. One is for affordable housing, for example. And so the money is paid, divided into the buckets, and you can use from one of the pots, or you can actually borrow from the other pots. But why don't I just say that we will find that staff report, and there's actually a great section in that staff report that articulates all the different types of impact fees and how they can be utilized, and we'll forward that to you.
Thank you. Go ahead, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. City Manager, if option, because obviously the team is on 4 or 5. If an option 5 was pursued as far as for staff now to sit down and see where monies can be raised, acquired, gained, however, but through the budgeting process, we see that that's not going to be able to come to fruition. Then is there the option to scale it back to an option 4, for example?
So the answer is yes, but it would cost additional money. And let's talk in detail. If we went with option 5, the very next step is to engage the services of a park designer to re-envision the park. And there will be certain line items in that scope of work, right? There'll be community visioning, outreach, site surveys. And all of that work, or a large portion of that work, is not useful if we decide to reuse the existing infrastructure. And so it's really not possible to engage the services of a landscape architect to begin the process of re-envisioning the park and do design work if we're going to utilize a significant portion of the existing infrastructure. Some of that work will be beneficial, but the vast majority of it will be tossed out because we're looking at sort of converting fountains to planter boxes and adding murals and other ways to sort of beautify the existing infrastructure.
Okay, but this is to give direction to try, because it's not budgeted, is try to find the funds first, correct? Before hiring somebody, because the money is not there, correct?
So this is direction on which path to take, and then we will identify funds to further that endeavor. So if the city council chose option 5, our next step would be through the budget process to identify funds for a landscape architect to begin the process of re-envisioning Posey Park. Estimation that will be, if not 100,000, potentially more. And so we would look to fund a park architect at somewhere between $100,000 to $200,000 to begin this effort, if we wanted to sort of forthrightly begin so. If we're looking at options 1 through 4, certainly we can, I think, find the funds to do option 1, and somewhere between options 2 through 4, I think that is something that we can work to identify funds for and execute on within 12 months.
Okay. And like I said, I think people are to option 4 and 5, so I haven't heard anybody acknowledge 1, 2, or 3, just so we can kind of scale this down. You know, to me, I've had this conversation with somebody, it's just, you know, the intentions are great to say, well, why don't we, you know, do so much, and then we can always come back and do it again. Costs go up, things happen. As you get off the train station, this is a visual. The way that mound is, I think, visual purposes for enforcement driving by it's not a good thing. I think there's a lot that can be done. So in my mind, at this time, I would say option 5, because I think, you know, this is what we already talked about with streetscape plans. That's why the photo is there. And so that was what, when we had outreach and we had community involvement and the walkthroughs and et cetera. So that's kind of where I'm at this moment. I want to kind of recap what I heard, and please, this would be very helpful to correct me. At this time, I'm hearing from Councilmember Mason, option 4, Councilmember Salazar, option 5, Vice Mayor Medina, option 4, myself, option 5, and then Mr. Hamilton, it was 4, but funding kind of was variable where I'm at too, is right? It was the funding, that's why I was asking that question. So,
exactly.
So
is everybody else accurate on their
Yes, thank
positions?
you for asking. Have I made any errors? I'm not seeing anybody chiming in, so I'm guessing that is. Oh, Vice Mayor, am I incorrect?
No, I didn't want to put it like that. The pressure on Tom or Councilman Hamilton. The idea here is, okay, so we'll look at, the worst thing is to hire somebody and the plan sits on the shelf for years, right? And the city manager just said the additional funding from development isn't going to come for a couple of years. So figuring what we can do to keep it, to make it not look as bad as it does right now. So if we could get the grants, great, but we don't know we haven't assessed all our parks and how much that's going to cost. So I think we need to take a little bit of a break here.
Well, let me ask you, Vice Mayor, and Councilmember Hamilton started nodding his head. And staff, you have to chime in, please. Are we saying on what I'm hearing from us on the greenery and landscaping, it is 5-0. We want that to proceed forward. On the Centennial Park for the 80K. That was maybe I'm hungry. It was a 5-0 to move forward on that. On the Posey Park, it's a split group at this moment for various reasons. City Manager, do we need an absolute definitive here, or you tell me where we're at as far as timeline and moving on topics?
So, absolutely. So again, this project really began from an ask from council to say there may be the potential for $200,000 to $300,000 of Measure K funding. What interim improvements can we make to beautify the area? And we have come back with options 1 through 4, which involve reusing the existing infrastructure. There's an option 5, which is totally re-envisioning the entire area, likely demolition of the fountain and opening up the area in placemaking. We don't know what that will look like now, but we know that we need to, if we go down that right, embark on a landscape architect to help us with that visioning and that placement. And so staff right now is looking for council to sort of pick the lane we're going down. And then we will forthrightly identify funding and move towards execution. And so
I understand that, City Manager. The question was, does staff need a direction this evening? Yes or no?
Yes.
Okay, that was the question. Councilmember Hamilton, please.
So if there was funding, I would be voting for option 5. There is not. And the thought of having to use a significant portion of our park in lieu fee when we have many other needs for parks across San Bruno is not palatable to me. And I agree that if I don't agree. I fear, and the probability would be very, very high that if we pursue option 5, that it will end up on the shelf for a significant period. So I will be supporting option 4 tonight.
And then Vice Mayor, are you still with option 4?
Mr. Mayor, yeah, for this setting right now, but we're having a priority setting meeting in a couple days, and there's other things that are more important than Posey Park, in my opinion. So I would want to just leave you with that. And
well, that's why I was asking the city manager. That's why I was asking the city manager, do we need it tonight? And I'm hearing the answer was he told, unless I misunderstood.
And that's fine.
Yes.
That this is a strategic initiative that will probably be added on, and we'll talk about it on Saturday morning at 8 o'clock.
City manager.
Yeah. Further clarification. We are not asking the city council to allocate funds tonight. What we are asking is to give direction for us to work towards identifying funds for the budget process. And so your final decision on this will come when you adopt the budget and fund the project. Caveat being, we heard you tonight saying, if you can find funds to move faster with Centennial Plaza, please do so and don't wait till the budget. Saturday morning's priority setting process is talking about a whole list of city council priorities, not just the streetscape, but a whole list of priorities. That conversation will also not be allocating of dollars, but it will be high level setting the priority projects that you want the organization to work on. And so I do think that there is a difference between the conversation we're having today, the conversation we'll be having Saturday, and the final budget decision that you will make in June that will set the course of what we work on for fiscal year 21-22. And so the ask that we have tonight is, what direction will we be proceeding down so that we can bring a budget to you?
Okay, so Vice Mayor, is that, he's asking for an option. So you're with option four. Four. And then Councilmember Mason had four, and fine, we need to move forward on this, and I think we've talked well and on this task, so why don't we go with option four? And that is by consensus, and it is option four. Anybody can correct me if I'm incorrect in my counting. Oh.
And Mayor Medina, I would caveat that to say that if the funds.
I just lost visual, so you go right ahead.
Thank you. I just want to caveat that to say that I don't disagree with Councilmember Salazar's point around being part of the longer streetscape plan. So if there's funds that staff can identify that doesn't take away from the other projects and the other initiatives, I'd definitely be happy to reconsider it when we get to the budget season. So thank you.
And I think everybody's feeling that same way. Okay, so City Manager, do you have the information you need on this topic? Item A of the study session.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, let's move on to item B of the study session, provide direction regarding the transition of personnel board functions to City Manager's Office and Human Resources. City Manager, and then Ms. Brazil.
Thank you, Council. Assistant City Manager Jennifer Brazil will come forward to provide the presentation. The City Council did receive a memorandum outlining this earlier. It is important to note that we, again, are not asking for final direction here tonight. This action, should we transition the duties of the Personnel Board to the City Manager, will have to occur at a regular meeting. And so we will put it on as a consent item and have a full staff report there as well. Tonight's conversation is really a presentation and discussion. I will also say that the memo that you received, the office in the memo that you received prior that outlined the recommendation, the concept has also been shared with both our labor unions and the Personnel Board, both of which are supportive of the direction. And we do have a member of the Personnel Board here tonight who's on the phone that would like to speak in public comment. And so at the appropriate time, Melissa, the city clerk, can you provide instructions for the Personnel Board chair to unmute themselves and speak? So with that, I will turn it over to Assistant City Manager Jennifer Brazil, who will provide the presentation.
Good evening, Mayor Medina and members of the council. My name is Jennifer Brazil. I'm the Assistant City Manager, and I am providing you a presentation to request direction regarding the transition of the Personnel Board functions to the City Manager's Office and Human Resources. The question you might be asking is, why now? Why are we bringing this to you at this time? We have 3 Personnel Board members. One recently resigned. Joe Roberts resigned after almost 11 years as a Personnel Board member. We have very dedicated, committed members of the community who have served as Personnel Board members. Our chair, Ed Fuentes, has been a member of the board for, this will be his 14th year, and we also have Ed Comerford, who is also serving for 14 years on the Personnel Board. The functions of the board have changed dramatically over the course of the years. And so for our agenda, I'll go over the role over the years of the Personnel Board, give you an overview, scope of responsibility currently of the Personnel Board, enhancements that have been made to classification, recruitment, selection, and our focus on equity and inclusion, staff recommendations, and our next steps going forward, and our request. So the Personnel Board is one of 12 boards and commissions, not including ad hoc committees, facilitated by staff. The Personnel Board was established in 1958 for the purpose of managing competitive service, morale, and discipline prior to the existence of today's expansive state and federal laws, as well as the city's collective bargaining agreements and professional human resources department. Over time, the functions of the board, as described in the original personnel system rules and regulations of 1958, have been subsumed into the Human Resources Department to comply with the complexity of state and federal laws that govern labor and employment. Key responsibilities today are what you see in front of you on the slide. The duties of the Personnel Board have changed dramatically over the decades. Substantial tasks included in the past approving policies, interviewing employees, and approving eligible lists. The concept followed a historic civil service government model with responsibilities that today are somewhat antiquated and redundant with existing protocols, modern labor laws, and union environment. Standard HR practice and adherence to MOUs have taken over guidance of the merit system and personnel management. The Personnel Board duplicates process already established within existing laws, MOUs, and industry best practices. The Personnel Board, as outlined in the personnel rules and regulations outlined in the document that was created in 1958, duplicates much of what's already defined through collective bargaining agreements and our existing HR processes. So currently, the key responsibilities of the Personnel Board are to evaluate the job descriptions. Those job descriptions are reviewed by departments and then vetted through our unions. We come to agreement with the unions, and then they're reviewed by the Personnel Board, and then those job descriptions go to the council for final approval. Again, after being reviewed by the city manager as well. This process is quite cumbersome and time consuming. It doesn't necessarily allow for flexibility necessary to adequately compete in the job market where industry standards are constantly changing. So when it comes to classification actions, staff proposes an administrative regulation to actually guide classification processes that comply with existing MOUs, while any new positions or cost impacts to budgets would require council action. So staff reviewed our current practice against our local survey agencies to identify how we compare. So the Civil Service Personnel Board model is not utilized or is phased out amongst many of our local agencies. Out of the 10 agencies we compared to for recent bargaining, only 3 others have personnel boards. Of those 3 personnel boards, none conducted meetings in 2020, and one city had only 3 meetings in 2019. And another hasn't had any personnel board meetings in the last 3 years. So some of the challenges of our current personnel board is that we really want to ensure that when we invite members of the public to serve on our boards and commissions, we're providing them a value for their time and energy and serving the city. And the role that they play now in the personnel board is simply to review our job classifications. And those are things that really are already done within the city. We've been very lucky because we've had these 3 highly committed, dedicated commissioners who have, met with us whenever we've needed them to review our classifications, and they take the time and energy to really understand, each classification, go through, make sure that our language is correct, and they really are just publicly editing our job descriptions. And we're not sure that that is
truly the best way to utilize the time and energy and attention of our community members. And so we took the time to have the discussions internally, meet with our unions, meet with our board members to see, what our next steps should be before bringing this to you publicly. So looking at, the current duties of the personnel board and focusing on job descriptions, we realized that their function is rather redundant with what already exists. Also, extending or abolishing eligible lists is another function that they perform, but that function is somewhat rare. And that action, we believe, really should be reviewed with the bargaining group, since it impacts potentially current employees that are on those eligible lists. So job descriptions should be created and reviewed when new positions are added, when the requirements of those positions change significantly, when turnover occurs, or on a regularly scheduled basis that corresponds with the performance evaluation process. Due to the cumbersome process of today, job description changes are often put on the back burner, resulting in compromised job postings and inadequate, outdated language and requirements. Up-to-date job descriptions are critical to clearly and accurately defining roles and job functions, managing workflow issues, serving as a basis for performance assessment, providing a standard of essential functions for determining whether an employee or applicant with a disability is qualified, and as an aid in developing workplace accommodations for return to work accommodations, equal pay analyses, reductions in force assessments, succession planning, and defending wrongful termination claims, as well as defending claims of retaliation, Fair Labor Standards Act, Americans with Disabilities Act, Family Medical Leave Act, as well as discrimination claims that fall under the EEOC and DFEH. HR has developed classification templates recently based on job type. So for entry level, journey level, advanced journey level, coordinator, supervisor, division head, department head, and the city's classification plan in the past had been inconsistent with job families over the years, with disparities in job description definitions, distinguishing characteristics, qualifications, and work standards, which increased the city's liability as there were no organizational standard. Human resources must ensure that scopes are consistent among job types. HR staff recently partnered with a classification consultant to redesign the city's classification plan with the following objectives. The first is to examine and eliminate any artificial barriers and biases within job description language. The second was to assist with the development of a classification structure that reflects the city's overall classification strategy and includes a clear definition of terms. The third was to develop a consistent format for class specifications aligned with job families. And then fourth, to develop a framework for the allocation of positions to the appropriate class based on the duties and responsibilities assigned at the time the position was studied. So in addition to this redesign process, HR acquired quality tools and training for staff to conduct thorough job analyses in partnership with key internal stakeholders in the development of job descriptions. Job descriptions are reviewed by the respective unions. In order to gain greater operational efficiency, staff recommends delegating authority to the city manager, who is the designated personnel officer based on our municipal code, to approve the creation and revision of a classification plan in accordance with industry best practices. So in order to move forward and prepare for greater efficiency, we wanted to give you an overview of what has been sort of completed, which is the redesign of the classification plan. We have implemented administrative regulations recently to establish best practices. We have 9 new administrative regulations within the organization that we've vetted through meet and confer with the bargaining groups. We've implemented quality tools and training to conduct thorough job analyses in partnership with our key internal stakeholders, in partnership with the union. And then what we're continuing is a focused energy on equity and inclusion. We want to implement administrative regulations to outline classification and recruitment selection and staffing best practices. And we'd also like to continue programs for training and development of our employees. So our focus on equity and inclusion. So currently, our goals that we've achieved for this year, so we've provided workforce training to managers and employees in the prevention of harassment, discrimination, retaliation, and abusive conduct. We've updated our administrative regulation to be in compliance with the law. We've retained impact justice, as you learned from our previous council meeting, to conduct a safe and equitable policy review. Developed a new classification structure aligned with industry best practices and examined biases in the development of qualifications of job descriptions. We've partnered with the San Mateo County and Lieber Cassidy Whitmore Consortium on over 50 web-based training opportunities for employees. We've developed and implemented the COVID-19 preparedness and response plan and implemented web-based training available to all employees. Our objectives going forward for this next fiscal year is to integrate new tools and technology for our employees to increase the quality and diversity of our applicants and to streamline the selection and onboarding process. And in partnership with our operating departments, we hope to develop programs to enhance employee engagement and retention. We want to evaluate our job classification utilizing the new templates that we've established to eliminate any artificial barriers to employment, increase training opportunities for staff with a focus on professional development, train our interviewers on competency-based behavioral interview methods, and ensure legal defensibility in all of our hiring practices, and continue to work on implementing our administrative regulations aligned with our city values. So our request tonight is to provide direction regarding the transition of personnel board functions to the city manager's office and human resources. We believe that these recommended changes will expedite human resource processes and allocate more time and resources to managing compliance and workforce development activities. The requested change will also eliminate non-budgetary administrative classification actions presented to council. The proposed change will allow the city manager to create and amend classification descriptions. The city council will continue to approve position changes with budgetary impact, such as new positions added to the budget staffing plan, reclassifications, departmental reorganizations, or any position change with budgetary implications, or salary changes through labor negotiation and salary schedules. Upon council approval, staff will continue to meet and confer with the union to establish 2 new administrative regulations, one for the classification process and the other for recruitment, selection, and staffing. And I just want to close with a thank you to our current personnel board members who have served the city of San Bruno for many years. We're very grateful for their service, and we believe that in order to gain greater efficiency, we would like to move forward with this new, more flexible model of workforce management. Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to open it to the public comment first, and then, so if anybody wishing to speak could indicate that. I want to make a comment before we open it up. It was a broad base. I want to stick to the topic. And City Clerk, I do understand that there is a speaker.
Yes, Ed Comerford, I'm going to bring you in. I'm sorry, Ed, I'm bringing you in the room right now. Just one moment. Hi, Ed, can you hear us?
Yes, good evening. This is actually Ed Fuentes.
Yes, I was going to say,
yes,
Ed?
I'm sorry about that. Yeah.
Mr.
Yes,
Chair, Mr. Chair, could you hold on? This is Mr. Fuentes, who is been on the personnel board, and so out of courtesy and respect to your dedication and devotion and chairing, and as you do very well, I'm not going to ask for a timer, so please speak as long as you wish.
No, I will keep it. I will keep it short. I just want to and I apologize for not seeing your faces. I am out of state in a rather remote area that has a slow internet capacity. So yes, I have enjoyed serving on the board over the past, I believe, 13, 14 years. And regrettably, I do admit that the personal board has reached its limit of effectiveness and can at times be a hindrance in allowing the city to rapidly move in making staffing decisions during these very, very fast times. Because we are a city-sanctioned board, we have to abide by all the public meetings, requirements, and we take up much time from city leaders to be present at our meetings. And as I look back, decades back, Mr. Mayor, I know you remember the Honorable and late Mary Ann Jones that led the board. And during her reign, the board actually conducted interviews, facilitated testing. They assisted in all aspects of the hiring process. But now, as technology has evolved and the HR staffing has increased, these activities have slowly been migrating to city functions. And now with the personal board made up of myself and Ed Comerford, and Joe Roberts resigned in December, we review, as Jennifer mentioned, review and revise job descriptions, evaluate eligibility list, and we review the government diversity report, the EO4 report. It's probably the only public report out there that's required from a municipality. With the current expertise of the HR staff and the city leaders, and also union reviews as required, I think that the role of the personnel board can easily be resolved into current city functions. I would however, like the city to not lose sight of the EEO4 form, which is a public-facing government diversity type form. It's valuable. It's ambiguous whether it's valuable or not, but it is public-facing. In conclusion, as the chair of the personal board, I would like to express my appreciation to Monica Walker, our HR manager, who, seamlessly stepping into a leadership role after the retirement of Tammy Yuki and before, Jennifer Brizell assumed her role. Monica, during that time, we had several meetings where she harmoniously brought us together and managed all the parties that need to be involved to get those job descriptions through. And I wanted to publicly acknowledge her, before any possibility of disbandment of the personal board. I thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for your service, and thank you for being on the call. And I would echo exactly what you said about Monica. She is a staple and certainly knows the team and the city staff. And if anyone's ever met her, she's an extremely kind person. And even if you're having a bad day, there was no way you could not be pleased to see her or have her greet you. So thank you for your comments. All right, City Council, we're going to bring it back to us. I don't see any other speakers. And what I would say is, I know there was a lot in the presentation, but I want to stick specific to providing direction regarding the transition of personnel board functions to the city manager's office. So let's stick to that. Vice Mayor.
Just 1 second, I'm going to have my son singing in the background to kind of chill out for a second. I'm sorry. We really. Yeah, so sorry about that.
Don't feel it. You know what? I'm over here and I got intimidated, so no problem. Vice Mayor.
Thank you for that report. A lot of history there, and a lot of things have changed, and it seems like it's the reasonable thing to do. Did we get a letter of concurrence from the union, or is there? That's my first question. It would be great if we were to hear that. It's not that. It's just good to have that information, and we can probably hear that or request that some kind of concurrence from them. That would make me feel better. As for this form that was being discussed, E004, was that it? It'd be great to kind of have that reported out as a recommendation from the personnel board. And serving one, I think it was last year, they take their job very seriously and they're very thorough. And so I thank them for their service over the years, and I am likely to go along with the recommendation. So thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. I think in the presentation, and staff will correct me, that yes, they did speak to the Teamsters, is whom they're referencing. They're not ours, but the Teamsters that represents the staff. I don't believe there is a letter, but I think there was, staff correct me, with verbal conversation, which they were in concurrence. Is that accurate?
Accurate.
I'm sorry?
Yes. And who represents the Teamsters offered to provide a statement if that was needed.
So you're assuring us, yes, they were spoken to, and yes, their concurrence are willing to do a letter, but staff has spoken to them. Okay, thank you, Vice Mayor. Councilmember Salazar.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So yeah, I'm inclined to go along with staff's recommendation on this. I was the liaison to the committee a couple of years ago, and as Ed mentioned, you know, the responsibilities have shrunken dramatically, and the committee went from 5 members down to 3 members. Now they're down to 2, and so this is definitely the right time to evaluate this and figure out if there's a need. And I think staff did make a very good case for eliminating it. It's unfortunate because I do like to give the public an opportunity to participate in what we do, and so by eliminating this, you know, it takes away one other opportunity for the public to participate in government. But hopefully we'll be able to replenish the pool with other opportunities as we go forward, and give people additional opportunities that are more fulfilling than this committee eventually became. So I'll be supporting staff's recommendation.
Who would we'll just go around once, I think would be sufficient. And so Councilmember Hamilton, see your mic is on.
I'm supportive of this action. The staff report was very comprehensive and made a good case for it. But then hearing Chair Fuentes concur with it himself made it a very obvious choice. This is a sensible thing to do, and I'll be supportive of this.
Councilmember Mason, do you have any comments?
Yeah,
Please.
so I wanted to ask, there is a labor committee as well, isn't there? Like a shop stewards or some representative from the union that meets with staff and on somewhat of a regular basis?
Yeah, so we do have representatives from each bargaining group. And we, for example, when we have updates on administrative regulations, we'll do a meet and confer with the bargaining group so that they can represent their collective bargaining. So we have multiple representatives from each employee group.
Great. And some of these topics that would have been maybe addressed at committee could also be addressed in that forum.
Duplicative from what is already identified in MOUs.
Okay. So I'm sorry, I couldn't completely hear that. Would that include some of these items? So the opportunity for the union to still have a conversation outside of negotiations is still there?
Yes, and we're going to be working with them on administrative regulations for classification and recruitment selection and staffing.
Okay, great. So I'm glad to hear that. And then I concur with, it was great to hear the chair agreeing with this. And I just wanted to point out that this is part of our strong governance direction, which was to take a look at our committees and determine where we are with them, where, whether we need new ones. And so thank you to staff and to City Manager Rogan for bringing this to us and for the staff presentation. And I support staff's recommendation here. Thank you.
Okay, my turn. I have couple questions and I have some statements. This has been something that has been talked about prior councils. That's why it went from a larger group to 5. Then it came forward to modify the personnel board back then from 5 to 3. I had not supported that because to me you were lessening the amount of folks on a body, and 3 is nobody usually has a committee or a committee commission board of 3, but that's what it is. With the resignation of 1, bringing it down to 2, it makes the sense. This is something that has been worked on for years ago, and they have modified it. As Ed brought up, it hasn't been modified because they did the interviewing. They did the recommendations. They provided the list to the department head. So it has evolved over many, many years that I've known it since a city employee to keep up with the times and then make modifications along the way. And so this is something that staff and prior city manager had worked on with Tammy Yuki. And then here staff has brought forward with these updates. We did meet, they met 3 to 4 times a year. And I know some of the other stats you're bringing up about not having meetings have also been COVID related, not certain. Also for history, it used to come to the city council twice for a job description. It was streamlined to have it come up once. So that was to have efficiency and effectiveness, and that was done some time ago. But I want to ask something to the assistant city manager. Did I hear correctly that the job descriptions would then no longer be coming to the council for not reclassification, talking about current, existing, and then making changes to job descriptions?
So changes to job descriptions that are simply just wording changes would no longer need to go to council, but any change that have a budgetary impact would go to council. So anytime there was, an addition to, a department, if an increase in a position or a change to a position that would increase a department budget, that would go to council.
And an example of that is we have some job descriptions where in the job description, it requires a Class A license. Well, there's been a change where not everyone in that classification actually has to drive a vehicle that requires a Class A license. Under the current structure, that has to go to the personnel board, to the union, to the personnel board, to the city council. This would streamline it to where simple wording changes under the general direction of the city manager's office and HR that are responsible for managing work and classification. So those wording changes would no longer have to go to the city council.
Okay, there's my point. So it did now, or it has, and that would change. Yes. So city council would not see it any longer, even though we've streamlined it from 2 to 1, and it would be streamlined more if looks like the council hearing to transition the personnel board. So in essence, you've dropped 3, but you don't want, the desire is not to have the city council review those any longer, unless it's a monetary situation.
Correct.
So that's the one thing that I'm not comfortable with at this moment. I think this is a big transition. I still think those should come. I think it gives perspective for public view. I think it gives perspective so the community knows what's happening, and I think it's good for council to be up to speed on what's happening. And I know some of it could be, Rico, you're changing Class B to Class C. Something can be very simple, doesn't mean, I don't know that that's under a consent normally. It's not a conduct of business. Also, the EEO4 was written by Ed and Councilmember Hamilton. I forgot who mentioned it. Oh, Uncle Vice Medina. So how would that be facilitated on having that? Or viewing that? Or is it, or we don't think we currently do we?
I'm sorry, Mr. Mayor, you faded out towards the latter portion. We didn't hear the question.
Okay, sorry, I'm having technical difficulties. I was saying the EEO4 that the Vice Mayor brought up. I don't think we currently see that, but that did come up from Ed. And then I was just saying, I think you heard me in regards to the job description review, correct?
Yes, with regard to the EEO report, I'll have Assistant City Manager address that.
So I'd like to address both issues. The first one, as far as the classification actions, I definitely understand the request to have classification actions go to council. We have a large volume of classifications that need updating. We are currently looking now at a classification review as we start doing our benchmark study with the bargaining groups preparing for negotiations. If we embark on that process, and now that we have our new classification structure, many of our job descriptions are very old. That would require staff to create a staff report for each and every job description that we choose to update and bring that to council. So I've worked in organizations where council has managed that process and requested to review classification actions, and then those organizations where that was delegated to human resources or the city manager's office and a function within the human resources department to work directly with the unions to manage and streamline. And in those cases, classifications were much more adaptable and we were able to stay on target with the competitiveness in the market. When staff is required to do that extra step, it just takes more time to update classifications and keep things moving and keep it on track. These things are always public because as soon as they're updated, they're posted publicly for the website. So all of our classifications are already public documents. You can go to the Human Resources website and you can find any classification that's posted. If there's a challenge or an issue with a classification, it is reviewed by the union, but anyone can bring that to our attention for revision.
What happens if the union and the city have differences on a change in the job description? Does it not get changed until there's a meet and confer and it has been conferred by union to make said change?
Absolutely. There's always a meet and confer on a job description.
Understood. So the question is, let's say you meet and confer in good faith and the answer is still no from them, then what? In my over 20 years in this field, there's always data to back up those decisions because, we're usually, there are lots of other, job descriptions to explain why we might need specific, it's with any meet and confer, right? You come to a decision, and there are processes for that. I understand that, but I guess what happens if, because it'd be the two bodies, it'd be the city through HR and it'd be the union. And I've been a shop steward. There are times that there's not a concurrence. So then my question is, what happens whether it's today or whether it's tomorrow?
So the simple answer to that is that it is a meet and confer, but it's not a meet and agree. It will still be a management right to change the job description, even if the union does not disagree. As the assistant city manager said, the goal is always to not have disagreement with your unions and to come to an amicable resolution. And we're for the most part, talking about wording changes. Another example, and this one I know happened recently, is that oftentimes job descriptions aren't looked at, but they're actually looked at often when a vacancy occurs. And so you have a vacancy and you say, you know what? Boy, we need to change this job description. And if there's a process by which, whether it's the personnel board or the city council, you're now delaying the point at which you can go out into the market to start recruiting for that job description because you need to draft a staff report and go to the city council. And this is an additional streamlining. And it's delegating that responsibility for wording changes to the professional staff, but still retaining the right of the city council to review anything that has a monetary value to it.
Okay. And would this change the current practices of the hiring? And then lastly, because I know it's arduous sometimes to hire folks, right? You got to go through the backgrounds of this and that. And especially in our public safety, I worry because I know they have the extra hurdle, right? Especially in our police and our fire. And this would not stifle, modify, change, or not allow us to get the quality personnel that we want in a timely fashion.
Absolutely not. This would not impact the way that we do hiring. However, I would like to address the other concern regarding the EEO4 reports. Currently, those reports don't go to council, and if it is council's desire, that's something that we can bring to council along with something that we had already talked about providing, which is an equity and inclusion plan on a regular schedule to council. Perfect.
Thank you for including that. Okay, and thank you for answering those questions because those are important, and I appreciate you folks taking that detailed time, and I do appreciate the chair being kind to offer that because that was one of my big questions and concerns is, what their thought is, and that's important to me. Vice Mayor Medina.
Yes, Mr. Mayor. Is it possible that that the council is sent an email when these modifications are made, and it could just be the link to the change, and we would just be advised of the change?
So, is that technically possible? Yes. Is it advisable? My recommendation is no. Just because you want to have clear authority, and to say staff has to send an email to council every time a change is made, over time that direction that you give when you take this action is going to be lost, right? If I would say in these things, assign the authority and you leave it at that, whether the authority is the city manager or the city council. And in regard to the city manager, that's the way our municipal code is written. It designates the city manager as the chief personnel officer. However, the detailed work behind that happens with subordinate staff, and the interface between the unions does not happen at the city manager's level. When things arise up to the city manager's office to approval, it's 99% of the times has already been vetted and approved by the union, and the city manager is the final approval. So it's just deciding what that final approval is. And Councilmember Medina, I would give that professional recommendation, whether we're talking about this or anything else. You want to set, as a policy, set your level of authority and leave it there versus tagging every other things to that level of authority. It's just when you're administrating a complex organization, those things can oftentimes be missed and difficult to achieve consistency with.
I hear you on that, and I agree with a lot of it. How is it noted of the changes that are being proposed? It'll be on the website, these are the job descriptions somewhere, and you click on it and it'll be, these are the changes, or just how would that work?
They're revised. So there is a revised date on the job description. So anyone looking at the job descriptions would be able to see when they are last revised.
I would say at a high level policy, we're talking about things that really almost will never rise to the level of a policy decision that the city council would really engage upon. It's wording changes to a job description in various departments. It may be across various departments, but truly operational in nature.
Sure, with all respect to that, and we're going from where the changes used to have to be approved by the council, right? So I was just trying to find a way that we would be advised of changes at some point. That's all.
Yeah.
From where we're at today and where we're going with this, it's a huge change. And just kind of like, well, just a little curious about it. That's all. And then hearing how the mayor kind of made that a point made me think about it. And like, well, how would I know? And maybe like on the website, it would be like these are the changes, and it'd be dates, but you'd have to go through each job description to find out if it was changed. But where it would be kind of highlighted, these are the ones that were changed, and that was it. And then, but anyhow, this is not going to hold me up from going forward. I just wanted to understand. I didn't think about it until now. So.
Any comments from staff before? Oh, I'm sorry. We'll just pause and then go to Councilmember Mason.
Yeah, I just want to say, I think that one of the reasons I'm comfortable with this change is that the union is involved in the process. It sounds like they're going to have to agree to this, and that the council, right, there has to be some kind of agreement between the two at some point to move this forward. And so I think that the fact that we manage, the city manager provides him with the discretion to work directly with each of his directors, who then in this case would be Ms. Brazil, would work directly with the unions on the job classifications. Otherwise, I'm generally not in favor of taking away, any direct power from the council. But I do feel that in this case, with the union being as involved as they are, and the conversations happening, that there would be representation on behalf of the membership. So that's really my justification around this. So I just wanted to say that for the record. Thank you.
Yeah, and I just want to be clear that I heard correctly. Yes, there's meet and confer. It is a requirement. However, what I understood too is if the union does not agree, city staff under the office of the manager may say it is being changed. There does not have to be a concurrence. So I don't want to give the misconception. Am I accurate? I mean, it could be, like I said, it could be a small word change. And if the union says, I don't like that word, I want a different word. It's like, hey, it's the same meaning and we're slicing hairs on a word. So it's going to change. Is that accurate? Just so we're clear.
That is accurate. And I'll remind the council that the union is knowledgeable of this and supportive of the change.
They are, but ultimately, it's not a reclassification, because that I think needs their solidification. I think, but correct me. But yes, staff can make the change even if union is not in full agreement with that job description change. Am I correct?
We're going to work with the union to establish administrative regulation that will be very clear about what the process is. However, before job descriptions even go to the personnel board, we've already established an agreement with the union. So we've been already doing this for years. And, sometimes the changes happen after we've already agreed with the union, and then the personnel board actually makes changes to the job description after we've already made an agreement with the union, which is sometimes problematic.
And Ms. Brazil, you're 100% right. I just want to make sure, based on what I've just heard and a comment that was made, I want to be really clear. The city staff has the ultimate say on the change of a current job description if the union is not a concurrence. Is that correct?
So if the union is not in agreement with what we're doing, they can always file an unfair labor practice against us. I mean, there's always a reason. Okay. Right. So they have, we
just wanted to clarify. You cleared it out.
That we're in agreement with the union. It is a meet and confer. It's called meet and confer, not meet and agree. However, our hope is that our employees are in agreement with the changes that we're making. That's why we have these processes, because especially when it comes to something like a job description, because it sets the tone for everything, performance. It's pay, everything that our whole engagement with the workforce.
Absolutely.
If they don't agree with the job description, we kind of have a problem.
Okay, I just wanted to have clarity on that because it's a comment. So with that, I'm going to look to my Zoom window here, and I believe that all of us are in concurrence with that direction. Am I incorrect? I've got a yes, a yes, a yes. Is that it? What was that? Okay, thumbs up. I didn't know how to take that one. And then a yes. So city staff, Ms. Brazil, do you have enough direction?
Thank you, yes.
Okay, so I think we have concluded our 2 items. I know we had said 8 and we're a couple minutes over. I want to thank staff and I want to thank the council. And we are going to adjourn to the next regular city council meeting, which will be held on April 27th, 2021. And in addition, as we were said, we do have a Saturday strategic initiatives 8 to 1. So have a good night and we will see you Saturday.